Okay, I'm live. Just sent off the invite to Dave. I'll just go over on here. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to get this live stream over on Odyssey. My bad. I messed up when I was setting everything up. Well, I have another interview coming up next week. And actually, let you folks know about that. I'm going to be interviewing Mark Snow, the leader of the Ontario Libertarian Party. And that's going to be next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern time. Anyways, when I was setting up that live stream and this one, unfortunately, at my level that I'm paying for, I'm only allowed to stream to 3 destinations at once. So one of them got kicked off, and unfortunately, it was Odyssey. So this is going to be live streamed to Facebook, Rumble, and YouTube, of course. Would have loved to have got it on the Odyssey platform because actually that's where I'm getting, believe it or not, the last live stream, I think it was the one that me and Dave had last one. Actually, I had almost as many views over on Odyssey as I did on YouTube. So there's definitely more and more people that are gravitating to these alternative platforms. And it seems like Odyssey is the place where, at least for me, I'm getting the most traction. So if you haven't found me on there yet, of course, it's Canadian Libertarian. Just go ahead and check that out. Like I say, what's this going on here? We're having trouble streaming to your destination. Is it possible your RTM server? Uh-oh. Let me see. I'm going to check because I'm having a problem. Sorry about this, folks. What's going on with Rumble here? Rumble. Or was that the one? No, this should be the one. Oh, I see Dave is there. Just give me one sec here. Let me go to Rumble. Okay. I don't know. I have to close this for now. Let me bring Dave in.
Hi.
Hey, what's going on, Dave?
Not much.
I'm having boomer issues today. Just kidding. Oh? I'm just kidding. I'm joking. No, I'm having this. I've been setting up the live stream. Well, I set up this one, then I have another one next weekend for the Ontario Libertarian Party leader. And I don't know, for some reason it got all messed up. And it's showing now that this isn't actually going out to Rumble. There's an issue with that. So I'm going to try to edit it here in real time. And hopefully, I don't know how I can do that, actually.
Well, if you need to take a break, go right ahead.
Well, no, just one sec here. Can't change the start time. It's already live. So let me click on this Rumble here. It's not yet actually giving me the option. Destination. Of course, I could remove it. Unfortunately, that wouldn't be good. Actually, let me open up Rumble just to see if something is actually showing up over there. Because what it's showing is that this actually isn't going out to Rumble. To be honest, perfectly honest with you, Dave, if you're not overly concerned with it, I'm not, because not as many people are following me over on Rumble as I would like. Actually, Odyssey is the platform that I seem to get the most traction. I do see something up here on Odyssey, though. Let's see what's going on here. Actually, this looks like us right here. Yeah, it's working. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to get this live stream over on Odyssey. Okay, I'm seeing it over there. So apparently it's working. So anyways, let's just move on. Okay, so we'll cancel that. Leave that there. And let's bring this out into a different view here. So how the heck have you been anyways, Dave? Before we get into the nitty-gritty of things.
Still here. Still above ground. It's all good in the hood.
That's always a good thing.
How are things for you?
Good, actually. Yeah. Actually, I was talking to the wife. I was like, so this is my 3rd time with Dave, and as a libertarian, but of course I bring the libertarian bender aspect to it anyways. But it's like if people were just tuning into my channel, they'd be like, what's this guy always talking about war and conflict? I thought he was a libertarian.
Well, we can make some parallels there, even as we're going over the Russia war stuff.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, like I say, well, my perspective, and I'm sure if you're shared as well, is I, just like anyone in the world, of course I care about the freedoms and liberties of people. So whether you're Ukraine, I don't care what particular state or tax farm that you identify on, right? But I care about the freedoms and liberties of individuals. So, and I'll reiterate this again, it's not like and neither is Dave, as far as I know, I won't speak for him, but I'm not picking a side here, folks, not Russian or Ukrainian. I just care about the freedoms of individuals that are contained within these jurisdictions, just like I do within my own people within my own country. But of course, because this conflict is taking place, and because people like Dave and myself recognize and are aware of the fact that the media is trying to misrepresent and skew things. What we're really doing here is just offering, alternative ways of thinking of things or perspectives. And even when you're talking about strategy and stuff, like I say, it's just offering more information. As far as I'm concerned, as a libertarian, the more information you can offer to people, without, like I say, we don't bring any ideological bent here as if to say you must believe what we say. It's not a call. It's just, once again, offering perspectives, opinions, even advice from Dave's perspective, because he has a military background in terms of these military conflicts. So anything that we can bring to the table, as far as I'm concerned, that can help educate or inform people or enlighten people, then I think it's a good thing at the end of the day, right?
Well, I mean, we don't work for CNN, so we don't expect you to, take everything we say. I mean, there's got to be a grain of salt with everything.
Exactly.
All right. Let's talk about the libertarian issues here. So let's talk. Let's like you said, let's not go to the nitty gritty. Let's stay at the conceptual, abstract level. So Clausewitz argued that war is foreign policy by other means.
Yeah.
So you're Vladimir Putin, you're Volodymyr Zelensky.
Mm-hmm.
You are negotiating across the table. You disagree. You can't come to an agreement through diplomacy and Lavrov and those guys. So somebody decides to pull the trigger, literally, and start firing cruise missiles at the other guy. So, even if you're a libertarian, abstractly, it's no different than any other policy forum for libertarians to concern themselves with. Now, I believe in peace. I'm a peacenik, but I believe the old Roman expression, if you want peace, prepare for war. Si vas pacem parabellum, or something like that.
Right.
So parabellum, prepare for war. So even if you're a libertarian, you still have to be mindful of these things.
Yep.
And if you want to ground it back in reality for people who want to talk about libertarianism, what your government or any government can do through military action is far, far more dangerous and far, far more costly than a lot of things that you would, you worry about taxes, you worry about trade, you worry about these things. Listen, a war is a bloody, messy business, and it shouldn't be gone into lightly, and it shouldn't be done on impulse and emotion. And if you look at, I'm truly shocked at all the politicians in the West who have been sitting here listening to, Putin warn them day after day, if we don't get an implementation of the Minsk agreement, which, I mean, if you don't understand that there was a Minsk agreement, then you don't really understand the politics behind why Putin pulled the trigger. And it's very insulting to Russians, and it's very insulting to their position to pretend like they never had a security problem with what's going on.
Yeah. Let me just bring something though a little bit in response to that though, Dave. So to me, I get, and what you're talking about there is at the macro aspect in terms of the state. But once again, my focus obviously as a libertarian would be on the individuals in it. So this is the problem with when you're talking about, and this is an issue I've had, and which is why no doubt is a major contributing factor why I've had people on the right and the left turn their backs on me and continue to do so this day, is because I won't play into this this thing, and I get the patriotism, I get all that, I totally, but the problem is when you're talking about the state, like I say, whether you're talking about Vladimir Putin, who represents the Russian state, or this Zelensky guy or whatever his name is, Zelensky or whatever, that represents the Ukrainian state, or Trudeau that represents the Canadian state, or Biden the reps, this is the problem that we as libertarians who like to respect the sovereignty and acknowledge the sovereignty of the individual, is we're collectivized under these pretenses. And this is the part where I like to really lay things out is, what these actors are doing. This is why I don't use we. I never use the term we when I'm referencing the state, because I don't consider myself part of the state. Now, unfortunately, like I say, I am in, this state called Canada, this tax farm, this, this modern plantation they call Canada. This just happened to be the particular piece of soil that I was born and raised on. And, there are certain aspects of people in my community and stuff that I might agree with. But once again, even in my own small community, never mind the province or the entire federal aspect, which is the country of Canada, there's so many different variances and differences and opinions and perspectives. It's really, this is why it's so impossible for people to actually think properly, critically about these things, is because when they are discussed, it's always in that collective lens of us versus them, right? In reality, it isn't quite that black and white. It is not that clear cut that it's us versus them, because there's a lot of us, just like people of Russia, the people of Ukraine, people in Canada. There's a tremendous amount of us that don't want nothing to do with any conflict, because it has nothing to do with, to me, when it comes to war, and I think most of us would accept this. I mean, at the end of the day, even if you look at like the Allies can say that they won, World War II, right? But if you take into account what you perceived as your win, and then you add up all the things that you lost, was it really much of a win? That's the thing. Which is why I think it's important for us, and I like doing this, is digging way down beneath that top layer of that collective groupthink, or just us versus them, because people today are inundated daily with that kind of nonsense. And I think it's really of paramount importance for us to break that stuff down and give people a more of a sense of the individual. So we're not perceiving people. I mean, look at what you're seeing today. I mean, it's cancel culture for the Russian people. And I actually follow a couple channels on YouTube, and these are just regular Russian people, like a husband and wife. And they go around and show different things. I do this for all different, I like to see different geography and locations around the world. And they're going around showing their price increases and how it's affecting them and stuff. And actually, let me just point out first and foremost, for those of us in the West that are getting, especially if you're getting most of your information from the established media, is yes, prices have, inflation has definitely creeped in, and there are definitely stores that are closed. One of the people that I watch, or the couples that I watch, went into a big mall, and they showed like Levi's was closed, McDonald's was closed, IKEA was closed. But in this mall with probably, let's say, a couple hundred big stores, big box stores, yeah, there was a bunch that were closed, but there was so many that was open that it'd be, to me, it's not much different than going to some of the malls where you see these places. There's always usually at least a few stores that have closed down, went bankrupt, or whatever. But things aren't nearly as detrimental or as bad as the media is portraying it. For
check fire right there.
Right. Okay.
Your observation of what's going on in North America. There are usually some stores closed in your local mall.
Yeah.
Why? Because China has been at economic warfare with us for 30 years.
Right.
Warfare is warfare, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So it's, I don't know if you've ever been to what they call the Rust Belt in the States. Mm-hmm. The old industrial heartland, Ohio and Michigan, and where I've been to Michigan, I've been to Wisconsin. Yep. You see whole neighborhoods of industrial buildings that are basically rotting out because the factories got scraped up and shifted overseas, and everyone lost their jobs. So while you were expressing a very valid libertarian mantra and mindset, mm-hmm. I will give you, I just jotted down 5 things why you should care about things like war. And then we'll get to the Gato Villano has talked about Greenland. I'll give him a different example.
Okay.
So here's the things that impacts you, not in the abstract, but in the real as a libertarian. Number 1, business.
Yep.
War impacts your ability to conduct business. What if the biggest transaction you've been working on for 3 years is with a Russian company? They didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong.
Yep.
You transact with them and you go on the Department of Justice U.S. hit list.
Yeah, no, just hold your thought there 1 sec. Because I actually want you to explain that, but just where I was going with my thought, I think you just were misunderstanding where I was going. What I was trying to get to at that point, but continue on, like I say, after I finish this, is just what it is when the media is representing, the reality on the ground. What I was pushing back is don't believe what they're telling you. And I was going to get to the point, same within Ukraine and stuff. What I was getting to the point is just because the media, because way the media is trying to present it, and this is the part that's most disturbing for me, is I'm hearing lots of rhetoric in terms of Russia's like doing a terrible job. It's a disaster. Their personnel is feeling defeated, you know, and they're basically to the point where it looks like Ukraine could even not just go on and I even seen some article or something the other day where they were even pumping up not just that they could win this war, but you know, when they perceive the war is actually won is not only when they've maintained all of Ukraine, but they've actually marched to Moscow, right, and overthrew Putin. So my thing is if you're listening to the established media and you're getting that kind of positive messaging, right, basically it gives good excuse or fodder for people to accept that, oh yeah, let's send more weapons to Ukraine, which is actually escalating the conflict. Because that's the thing, if you're believing this nonsense, just like a lot of the leftist media has been doing for their people that followed their stuff. I can't believe how many times they've been let down and disappointed, and they still believe the rhetoric, but they're getting them all hyped up thinking that there's going to win. And like I say, there's going to be some very sober second thoughts, and there's going to be a lot of death, devastation, and destruction that's going to be a consequence of constantly pumping up this narrative of, oh yeah, you know, Ukraine's like literally going to destroy the Russian military, and so let's just keep like flooding them with weapons. That's the only place where I was going with that. But go ahead. Sorry, finish your.
Oh, yeah, that's perfectly fine. But you know, let's ground it in realities of the day. So the number one impact war will have is on your business. The number two impact, and we found this out after 9/11.
Oh, externally. You mean externally? Because if you're internal, the number one effect would be your life, right?
Yeah, fair enough. Fair point. But if you're inside your own country and your state goes to war, this is how it impacts you. So the second one is surveillance. Now suddenly we have a justified need for the US government to store, you know, millions of petabytes of information from around the globe so they can go back through your old phone records or Skype calls and figure out if you were organizing an attack, or just keep them on hold if they want to bring up some dirt about you and out you in the press. The third one is your basic freedom, right? Remember, when things go to military, lockdown, military curfew, you are not allowed, you can't go outside and enjoy a sunny day. Why? Because they told you to stay indoors. Obviously, and then the next one down is taxes. If you think this is going to be cheaper for us in the long run, getting involved in Ukraine, and we can talk about the issues, but you're right, the media starts pumping this stuff out. But the last one I'll say is movement. All right, war, because, you know, like you said, we are individuals. The Russians are, you know, my Russian Canadian friends are just as much my Canadian friends as my Ukrainian friends. Right. And you know, from my experience in Yugoslavia, that we had interpreters that were both Croatian and Serbian and Muslim, and when they were here in Canadian society, they were all equals. But once they started talking about the war and how it affected their communities, they were all in confrontation with each other. So we lose a lot of what we believe in our freedom when we allow this sort of war hysteria to take us over. That we become, like you said, the media is pumping up this message, and I find it, I find it scary as all hell that we've gone through 2 years of economic carnage, brought on by unjustified, unsupported lockdown procedures, which were completely meaningless and worthless and harmful. And now suddenly we have to worry about Ukraine. We can't do an inquiry into what went wrong, why masks didn't work, why we shouldn't be allowing health ministers or one expert doctor to dictate to everyone what you should be doing for your own risk on a virus that's 99% recoverable. Like insanity. Obviously, if you're a Democrat or a liberal in Canada, this is like a godsend. This is, we get to distract everyone on something that isn't about us and our failure at a time when we really should be going through. Now let's go. God, I hate war porn. I agree.
Do you have another slideshow you want me to?
Yeah.
Well, I just know because I know you sent a couple of pictures or whatever it was that
Yeah. I
you want
did.
me to, if you want me to bring them up for
Sure.
you,
Yeah.
you're doing the thing there. Do the same thing, just kind of put it up there, and then I'll bring it onto the screen. I'm not sure if you remember how
It's
you did.
uploading. Yeah. So,
Okay, yeah.
this is in a lot of ways, it's like, I don't want to make a direct parallel, but it's a lot like people and their viewpoint towards abortion. Now, I find the whole social construct of government and human beings that aren't the woman in the room deciding what they can or cannot do, and that is a very difficult issue for lots of people, and there's justifications on both sides. But if war forces everyone not to have an abortion, then the government has used its power in a military sphere to take away your power at home. So we, as I think you said this before, ignorance is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
We have
in the age of information, ignorance truly is a choice.
Ignorance is a choice. So if you're just believing CNN, and my God, I turned on CNN the other day and I tweeted out, like, I was just absolutely disgusted at how slanted, how divisive, how unfair, how untrue. Look, there's going to be Ukrainian mothers crying over soldiers' graves. There's going to be Russian mothers crying over graves. Okay, let's not make this all or nothing. One side is good and the other side evil. That to me is one of the biggest pushbacks that libertarians should make.
Yep.
Immediately when people start. And by the way, it's called ethnocentrism. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be smarter than the racists and the bigots, you say, oh, you're adopting ethnocentrism. So Sumner, who was a sociologist in the States, he wrote a paper early 1900s, and he described it as a philosophy where you embody your culture as your group, and you automatically assume that your group is better than everyone else. Yeah. And you can see that mindset in a lot of the CNN work. They say the blacks, the whites, the Hispanics, as if we aren't all individual people thinking on our own. Yeah. And then they do one hierarchy further and go, Americans, American exceptionalism. We are so much better than everyone else, that sort of thing. And you hear it from Fox as well. But you're taking this with a grain of salt. Now let's go.
Can I bring in one quick Canadian example of that? I like bringing this one up because we are Canadians after all. Is my good friends, and if they're watching this streams, I don't mean this, but come on, guys, let's be honest here. It's that kind of supporter, and I've got a few of them, like the Leaf, the full on. The Leafs haven't won a Stanley Cup since I've been alive. I'm 51 years old, and yet there's still people, like you say, that just have that dog when they just got to blindly support, right? No matter what, or they're the best, right? Really? It's been like, 5 or 6 decades, right? Since they wanted Stanley Cup, but yeah, they're the best, man. That, like you say, now that's a pretty minor and a kind of a comedic example. But if you think about it, if you dig below the surface of that comedic part of it, or the examples you were bringing, it's the fact that people are willing to be so irrational in their own minds based on this blind conformity to an in-group or a tribe. That's the part that has always disturbed me, right? Even in my own family, which is a very small tribe, I don't treat everyone the exact same way. Like some people, if you treat me like garbage, I'm not going to be the one that's going to treat you better than I will. So I accept that there are individuals. But like you're saying, and these examples, is people will throw any rational thought just for that blind conformity to the tribe. And that has caused, goes from small issues in your family right up to the point of having, the Nazis come to power in the 30s and 40s, that kind of in-group preference and tribalism, right?
Well, actually, you've hit on something, and I want to come back to that, but let's get to Gatto Villano's point. He says, imagine if it was, where is it here? Let's say Greenland joined the military coalition against Canada. Well, actually, Gatto Villano, a couple of months ago, where you may not be aware, Vladimir Putin used the exact same example, only he used Mexico and Canada. And he said, imagine if we put nuclear armed missiles inside the confines of Mexico on your border. Okay. So there was a comment. So he tried to explain to the Western, to Americans in American terms what was going on. Now, the leader of Russia, he's got better things to do than explain things in those terms. But Americans and Canadians don't seem to see that the actual parallel to what's going on is the 1960 Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right.
By moving potentially nuclear armed missiles closer and closer to Russia's border, it means that they have a very small response time to something that lifts off. Now, here's something that most people don't know. The U.S. has a satellite system where if a missile launched anywhere on the surface of the Earth, and missile, I mean a guided rocket. So that's the difference. A rocket is you just, pump and shoot and away it goes, and it may be guided or not. A missile is a guided one. When we put astronauts in them, it's a missile, not a rocket.
Yeah.
Although we build rockets and then, okay, so you get what I'm saying. So the point is that the Russians don't have the ability to see missile launches anywhere on the Earth's surface. So why is that important? Well, if we accidentally escalate the situation to DEFCON 2, that we have told Russia to be ready for nuclear conflagration, they might think an airliner taking off or a missile outside their range some peaceful NASA missile is the start of a war, and they might launch accidentally. So it's a question of security by time. The closer you put your missiles, the faster you can get it to shoot up and drop down on the other side. I was I don't want to make this too political, but I was laughing at Pierre Poilievre online, who was talking about he stands with Ukraine and so on, and I said, yeah, well, wait till you learn what a MIRV is. And so our politicians are completely out of their depth and pretend, they're all pretentious in that. A MIRV, the Americans created, a multiple launch, independently targeted re-entry vehicle, which means one missile breaks apart into 5 or 6 or 10 missiles. And each one of those 10 missiles has 10 targets that it can hit. In other words, it only takes one to get through a shield of air defense or space defense, whatever you like, to obliterate half of New York State. One, that's it. So when they say, oh, well, what about their concerns and so on? Well, look, all you need is one to wipe out Moscow. Now, if you were in Putin's shoes, and I'm not defending him, I'm just saying, put yourself in those shoes and go, your job is to protect your people. So, Putin said, what if we put missiles in Mexico? Kennedy, the brothers, John and what's the other guy's name? Robert Kennedy. They believed that they were going to go to nuclear war with the Soviet Union at the time because they were putting missiles in Cuba. So it's not unlikely that Putin believes, especially after Russia was promised that there would be no eastward expansion. And then every couple of years, so this is the problem. So part of that is us. Part of that is us as, 50-year-old men not speaking up over those years, reminding people, look, we promised them we wouldn't go east. And then we got guys like Obama who are promising things to Zelensky and then leaving the scene because he doesn't care what happens after. He can go on his book tour and get $1 million for a speech and whatever else. He's not stuck trying to fix what he started. And why it's also important, in the mindset of government is because it takes a long time for these things to show up. I have been warning, I'm sure you've looked at my feed. I've been warning a war is coming for years, just like I warned that there's a stock market crash coming. Now, they've been able to just pump money into the system to keep that going. But sooner or later, like these kind of things. So you talk about, why is this important to libertarians? Well, a run on the Russian banks or a run on the Russian debt, suddenly JP Morgan and Bank of America and all these guys, they have massive amounts of losses on the Russian books. Well, they suddenly start firing people to make up their earnings per share. It'll trickle down to the rest of the economy. So you especially cannot be, I don't know how to say this in a polite way. You can't be disinterested if your government is about to commit itself to war. And it's shocking me how badly these people that don't understand how this stuff works are just so quick to jump on their emotions. And this whole no-fly zone thing, are you insane? These people have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, actually, before you go on to the no-fly zone, I just want to reference what you were talking about, because actually that was another aspect of these people I follow on YouTube and showing some of these stores. They're closed, but every one of them, without exception, said that they were temporarily closed, and all the stores have fully stocked shelves. All of their machinery, equipment is all still there in Russia. And I've heard some inklings kind of bandied around in some of the media. And in Russia, well, even the CBC was reporting on now that McDonald's is withdrawn. Well, Russia's just basically going in there and going to basically create their own form of McDonald's, right? And they're making no qualms or secrets about the fact that if they have to take all of that equipment, it's like, okay, you guys are leaving our country, right? And they're going to basically confiscate, go in, right, and take over all that equipment and all that. And then, of course, what makes McDonald's distinguishable from other, fast food chains is, the machinery, the particular processes they use, and all that stuff can be completely reverse engineered and used by the Russian. And think about it, if you're a company like McDonald's, that's going to be, like you say, quite a write down if you're not just losing the business in that country of 150 so million people, but now if you lose all of that capital that you invested in all that equipment and the products and all the supplies, that's going to have an effect on us, right? It's not just going to have an effect on the Russian people. And because the Russian people, can actually, kind of find alternative ways to get around some of those sanctions, as we're seeing, I think some of those sanctions are actually going to have sometimes even more of an effect of us on the West, because it's Western companies, it's Western corporations are the one that's going to take this pretty severe hit economically, which once again, that all has to get trickled down to somewhere, right?
Well, one of the things I read online is Putin is telling airlines that they can confiscate the jets that they're leasing from Western companies.
That's pretty crazy stuff right there, but that's definitely going to, like you say, right? That's going to have an effect on all of us. Aeroflot
still needs to fly, even if they've got Boeings. And they've talked about, they've talked about having their jets serviced in the West, where they'll be allowed. They're going to be allowed to land eventually. We're all going to come back. What I would say is one of the most important things we have to do as free peoples is to get us back to peace as quickly as possible. The longer this goes, the worse it is for everyone. So I had a teacher who was a young man during the Vietnam War. He decided to say, fuck this shit, I'm out, and move to Canada. Yeah. So how does that help your country? Speaking out, having one more voice saying the people in Washington, D.C. are crazy, let's not follow them. I mean, think of it this way, just put these two things side by side. The U.S. government couldn't get rid of Fauci. You trust the U.S. government to handle the war in Ukraine properly. You literally could fire one bureaucrat and send him to jail or investigate him and for the rest of his life, but somehow you're going to get you're going to solve something in a foreign country. That's absolute madness.
Yeah.
So, the libertarian aspect is we're, number one, non-aggression principle. We are, swept up in this emotion of people getting upset about it, and it is horrible. I've been in a war zone. It smells like death. it's hell. Like it's not a, people are miserable when they're there. It's not fun for anybody.
Yeah.
But
Actually, I was just bringing this up because you brought up about not just Mexico, but the whole effect with the libertarian and the individuals and the stuff. Well, this is a perfect example of an article out of CBC News that came out, what was that, yesterday? Anti-war Russian. So these are people who are in Mexico now, whether they got there because they fled Russia or they just happen to be on vacation down in Mexico. You know, how they got there, let's just forget about that for a minute. But we're talking about people who are identifying as anti-war Russians. So they don't want nothing to do with that conflict, right? And they're at the Mexican border. They're barred from entering the U.S. while Ukrainians are admitted. Now think about what that does to that Russian who has nothing to do. You know, they could be completely apolitical, could be completely peace loving, and not want to get involved, obviously, at all. But what this messaging is sending to them, this message that the U.S. state under the Biden administration is sending to them, is, yeah, no, we're going to treat you, we're going to be xenophobic. In reality, we're going to treat you, you know, based on your, I don't know, not just your skin color, but where your actual geographic, where you happen to be born. Because some other guy in that country, Putin, namely Putin, did something. We're gonna treat you, you know, like not even as a decent human being and give you the opportunity. Like if you're going to allow the Ukrainians to come in, why would you not let a Russian to come in, right? But this is the problem, and what we're seeing, this rise of cancel culture, and we've seen it domestically, how it's been rampant and causing a lot of internal division and strife. But now we're seeing this going on the global stage. And I tell you, this cancel culture, when I see the people doing it, they remind me of adolescents, people with childlike minds. And this is, I think, one of the most dangerous aspects of this conflict and the potential of the West, and not just sticking their nose in it, the leaders of the West, these politicians and the media pundits and the propagandists, is these aren't, we're not talking about your Churchills or not. Like, these are, like I say, basically adolescents, very vengeful, very petty, right? Adolescents who are literally poking the proverbial bear. Now, it's one thing to get into a conflict and to have the strongman approach and mentality, but Canada is nowhere near that position. I mean, you got Trudeau, right? I mean, look at what the optics that's being sent. And the type of people is, no, we're not going to go over there and fight any wars. We don't have that much commitment, right, for freedom, the left, the authoritarian left, right? But we're more than willing to cancel people, right, on the internet or you know, at borders if need be. And I will bring one more thing up there. Just give me 1 second. Mm-hmm. This is another aspect of it, and this should be disturbing for anyone. Just 1 sec here.
Yeah, take your time.
This is the that this is the kind of response that people are putting out there, people who are representing the government of Canada. Okay, just 1 sec. There it is. So, not sure if you're familiar with this, Dave, but this, once again, another CBC article. This was from a couple days ago. Canada's UN mission goes viral with tweets mocking Russian letters to United Nations. So, Russia fired back, accusing Canada of kindergarten-level Russophobic libel. So basically what it was there was a letter that the Russian government sent. Basically, actually, let me see if I can click on it. Okay, well, I'll just do it here. Canada's UN mission annotated one part of the Russian letter that read, like other members of the international community, we are gravely concerned about its deterioration, referring to the dire humanitarian situation in and around Ukraine. Canada's UN mission crossed out the first few words and changed the rest to read, we are not gravely concerned about its deterioration, and inserted at the end, because we are the primary cause. So once again, whether you agree or not, no matter, I'm not picking sides, but here it was at least someone in that Russian Federation or that's part of the government over there trying to figure a way to create some kind of humanitarian aid. Now, whether it's being used for propagandist purpose, at the end of the day, if there's some humanitarian aid that can get to the people of Ukraine, that's a good thing, right? How it got there, whatever. But the main thing is if you can get help and aid to the people. So, but what did the Canadian, like I say, these childish people that are running this country, and this should be disturbing for you, even if you're one of these leftists that support the Trudeau Liberals. Like and that's no joke. This is literally like kindergarten level. This is childish adolescence in a time of very serious conflict. What do you expect, and what kind of leadership are you getting from these actors that are representing Canada? Nothing but childishness. Another aspect, not sure if you're familiar with this too, Dave, but oh yeah, Canada's sending some weapons. Actually, let me bring that up. All right. That's the thing. The rhetoric is so out of touch with the reality that I'm
well,
shocked.
I mean, the number one point here is that politicians learn to do what voters accept.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right here, there, like I say, right here is another one. This one's out of the National Post. Backpacks, beans, and 60s era rocket launchers. The military gear Canada pledge for Ukraine. So that's the thing. They love pumping up their chest. This is the problem with these leftists, these authoritarian leftists. They've been doing this for years, pumping up their chest. And in reality, they act like they have all this power, this might. But in reality, what they've got is rhetoric. And the minute you pull back the curtains and see what's behind that, it's a disturbing visual, to say the least. I mean, the fact that you're sending, like, if you really want to help Ukrainian people, the best thing you can do is not send them 60s era rocket launchers or backpacks. It's to find out ways to negotiate peace so that more and more people get to live, grow up, and live their lives as free human beings. That to me should be the most important thing.
And to get Ukraine on the back to recovery as fast as possible. Here's reality. All these human beings that are in jeopardy now, and it would be no different than Afghanistan or anywhere else, they are all within 1 year of extinction, meaning we have to get everyone housed, clothed, fed, and you're 100% right. And I tried on Twitter, of course, nobody listens to me. I complain to journalists, and they ignore that I'm even in the CPC leadership race. Yeah. By the way, I set out a plan, and I even phoned Dmitry Peskov's office and got hung up on by a nice-sounding Russian lady, offering to act as an emissary to go. Look, I'm from the West. I'm not any of the European nations. I'd be willing to go into their capitals, because I think the way this will play out, and it doesn't matter how many days of war start and end between here and now, the way this will play out is the same NATO forces that have been flowing weapons in but refusing to give Zelensky anything decisive, and I'll explain that in a minute, are going to be the same ones that tell him, order him, look, you take this deal or we stop giving you anything. We will, we want the suffering over with. We want your people to go back. Look, at the end of the day, Russia and Ukraine aren't going to get launched on a hover ship and go somewhere else. They're going to be beside each other forever. Yep. Putin has made some gross miscalculations and tactical blunders, which will only exacerbate the problem. And as I've been saying on Twitter, he may win the war, but he's now going to lose the peace, because modern warfare doesn't begin and end with a declaration of war and a peace treaty, a Treaty of Versailles. It will be literally hybrid insurgency for 20 years. There will be suicide Ukrainians killing themselves and 100 Russians in a church, in a movie theater for years. He doesn't understand what he's unleashed. And it's so we as Canadians, we had a pivotal, unique opportunity not to be the naggers, not to be the morally condescending, superior-minded know-nothings. We had the chance to come in and say, look, we don't live in Europe, right? Any nation in Western Europe right now is like their teeth are chattering from either fear or anger, and the ready response to pick up a weapon and go east. They don't want the Russians back any more than the Russians want to be in the West. Right. But they're on a knife's edge. The U.S. As the main backstop of NATO, they have to be in the alliance, right? People don't understand about General Eisenhower. Half of his job had nothing to do with the war, but fighting, prosecuting, Operation Overlord and all the rest of that. It was getting nations to stop squabbling in the background and be united in their purpose and going forward. So, with Joe Biden, I'm worried. But Canada had a unique opportunity. If we hadn't been in NATO, if we had been a neutral party, because remember, and going to your infantile comment about sort of the policies of Trudeau, his flippancy and his complete ignorance and superiority, we share a border with Russia. You don't think they're not going to remember? And I'll give you one more extrapolation, which is theoretical as far as I know. Do you know who the best target would be for Russia to launch one nuclear weapon at? Ottawa.
That's pretty close to America, though.
It's far enough. Well, Chernobyl, right?
Yeah.
It's 4 hours away from New York. It's very close. We're not in the continental Europe. And it would be a message that would be received loud and clear. And it would show that foolish Trudeau, in his arrogance, brought this on himself and brought it on his people. So you've got Trudeau on one side acting like an airheaded cheerleader, throwing our stuff at the Ukrainians in a direct, violation of some sort of neutrality, because we're technically not allies with Ukraine. He would be the one to get nuked. So then you think to yourself, well, okay, so what about the other parties? Who was the grown-up in the room? No, Pierre Poilievre's jumped on board too. So is Candice Bergen. So is Jagmeet Singh, the happy teddy bear of socialism, is all for confrontation with Russia. We can't handle Russia. Russia has more artillery pieces than we have infantry. Wipe over.
Just the sheer fact, I was listening to a CBC radio program actually this morning, and it was all over the place. It was at the House, I believe it was. There was one aspect of it, and this is another thing that a lot of Canadians aren't taking into consideration, because a lot of that stuff, especially if you read, you're scrolling through your news feed, if you're seeing, there's some things in disgruntled areas within the Canadian military, a lot of people don't pay too much attention to that, unless they themselves or some close member of their family are. But I'll tell you, as someone who have friends in the military and have heard lots of stuff and read lots of news reports, there's a lot of demoralized people within the Canadian military, and for good reason, because they're playing this, not just these social justice warrior, whether you call them LGBTQ, BIPOC, this identity politics. Like the whole point of a military, and once again, I'm not actually a big fan of blind conformity or nationalism or collectivism by any stretch. But one thing I do recognize and understand that it's of paramount importance, if you're going to have anything that's considered a cohesive unit, aka the military, at bare minimum, they actually genuinely have to be cohesive. But what they've created, just like they've done in every environment in Canada, in every institution, and even now that affects us in our own private homes even, is they've created so many wedge issues and divide and conquer messaging and rhetoric that has put us all into these little silos and these little groups. Well, they've done the exact same thing to our military. So we don't even really, and I shouldn't be saying, I hope Putin's not listening, right? But the truth of the matter is we would fucking do well. And I mean, I've even heard guys that literally, whether they're active now or they were active very recently, have told me with real world example, they've seen it with their own eyes. Yeah, you don't want this fucking country to have to get into any brawl anytime soon, because we're in a bad fucking shape military wise. And in terms of creating any cohesion, now, of course, war kind of does have that, tendency of power to bring people together, even when they're disgruntled or frustrated with each other. But that's being quite risky, right? And when you're talking about global conflicts or the potential of these rise of global conflicts, at the very least, like you were saying earlier, whether the Romans, I have my own thing, is walk softly, but at least carry a big stick. You have to at least, right? I don't walk around looking to get into a fight, but I've made sure that over the years that I can handle myself. You know what I mean? Hopefully I'll go the rest of my life without ever having to have a fight. But I've made sure that I've done some training. I've got enough experience in my life that if the need arises, I can. Doesn't guarantee any success, but at least I'm confident enough to give it a go. Whereas, this military that we have in Canada, this identity politics, this constant fight and conquer has created an atmosphere and an era where you could take the Crips right out of South So Los Angeles could probably come up and kick the entire Canadian military's ass, right? It'd probably be better armed and equipped with newer weapons, to be honest with you.
The LAPD is over 10,000 police officers. That's one Army division.
Right.
LAPD could probably take Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto without too much problem.
Yeah, and yet you got these people in the Trudeau Liberals and this is the insanity that I've seen where they're pumping their chest, right? And it's a disturbing thing to see, because not only are they beating on the drums of war, which to me, once again, at the very least, what happened to the 60s hippies? What did your parents do to you? No, but I gotta wonder, where are these lefties? I see people who are against war, but those are typically just apolitical, independent thinking people like you or I. But where is the left, who historically predominantly were the ones that were most vocal against wars or conflicts? I mean, just got to go back to, Vietnam. Those memories still should be fresh enough into most people, maybe not the younger generation, but they should at least be fresh enough in anyone Gen X on up mind to realize that, yeah, it was the left who were the most against any foreign conflicts. But where are they? Right? Just goes to show, apparently their positions where they were when they were younger has drastically changed as they get older. What positions are they filling today? Because apparently war seems to be something they're gnawing at and chomping at the bit and pretty much, cheering on at this point in time, which is I find quite disturbing, and it's got to be at least somewhat disheartening for the people that identify in the left. Is like, wait a minute, aren't we supposed to be about not war? Right?
It's funny because the liberals have morphed into neoliberals, and the conservatives have morphed into neoconservatives. And neither one of those has any resemblance to where they started. But I will point to the reality that the left has no economic argument anymore.
Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so they only drive on emotions, because that's the only field of play they can win. Getting indignant, being a victim, complaining about other people. Cancel culture is the most successful neoliberal mentality that they have. They can't justify anything they do on any other plane. But getting mad, getting people to look at you, having a hissy fit at somebody, Putin today, tomorrow it's you. That's the other thing that they like. Intersectionality is the most absurd way of looking at life, because what that means is that you're only the leader of the pack until the pack decides to run you over. We're gonna bifurcate, and suddenly you're just unacceptable anymore. And I've made this point in the past. Why it's important, because again, it's not unlike the justification for war coming through hysteria. It'll be neoliberals that argue we should allow pedophilia. It'll be liberals that tell you we need necrophilia. That's the next minority. And I say these half jokingly, but the reality is they are desperate. And I think I last time I was on, I was talking about the liberal shtick. We find a downtrodden group. We emote so much virtue signaling about how unfair their life is. We're going to pick up the challenge, Obama and gay marriage. And then we don't solve it until the 5th year after we've gotten elected twice on it, because it really was never about that. So, socialists have no answer except get the government to give me money, even if the money makes no sense, even if it raises inflation. And we're morally outraged by your individuality, your free thought, and your contravention of the group. How dare you? So this is why we're at where we're at. And we need people to accept that you can't just live on raw emotions, and your government is the absolute last bastion that you want people who are hysterical in charge.
Yeah.
This never ends well for you, the people. You want cool, mature people who understand the grave nature of the things that they're working on. Yeah. And they're thinking ahead, so you don't have to be the one that's picking up a rifle and going to the east. Because all Putin has to do is call our bluff.
Yeah.
Because it's a bluff.
Yep.
We aren't ready to go to war in Ukraine. We aren't ready to go to war in Poland. and he's not going to wait 10 years for the Germans to rearm. Okay. So we got to be very careful how, we need to be even-handed, and we don't have anyone even-handed at the top. Azov Battalion. Okay. So if you go to my feed, I recommend
one sec there, man. I just wanted to bring this up too there. So yeah, because this is kind of tying right into all this, basically what we're talking about here. So this, once again, another CBC article. And like I say, the reason why, and most people that watch my channel know at this point, is you got to be able to get into the minds of these people, the thought processes that's driving them, right? And this speaks volume. Like, one thing I will say over the last 10 years or so is, wow, I've become so much more wiser and being able to read people now, because like I say, this whole thing with social media, just like what it's done for the algorithms, it's also done for observant people like myself. And I'm seeing like the psychology and how this is manipulating the mass, media manipulation, how that's affecting the human mind and the human psyche. I'm seeing this playing out in real time, and this stuff like this. So wartime rhetoric, how Zelensky's address compares with other speeches by foreign leaders. Third Ukrainian president to address parliament, first leader to do so virtually. But I won't bore you with reading this, but basically what this article is about is, trying to compare, like, is this guy has this guy got at least the right sounding messaging and the rhetoric? Is he a good enough actor, right? Right, basically is what I'm saying. And this guy, not even joking here, folks, this guy literally was an actor, right, before he became the head honcho over in Ukraine. But basically can he put out enough, heartfelt, emotional rhetoric that will draw in enough people into this conflict? And that's, to me, like I say, that is disturbing, but once again, just perfectly plays into what I've witnessed, whether you're talking about COVID, whether you're talking about the financial crisis, whether you're talking about abortion, whether you're talking whatever issue, whatever politically divisive issue that you think of, right? It's the same kind of motif, the same kind of mentality, the same kind of psychology that's being used to, like I say, manipulate. And they literally express it, hoping that most people are not thinking deeply enough to recognize this. But this is manipulation, of the minds of so many people on a level. Like I say, this is the kind of propaganda where you're literally trying to get people excited. Now, I get it if you're trying to do it, for your own like country. If someone's invading you, although you shouldn't really need much incentive to defend yourself. Trying to live is probably enough incentive for that. But they're literally trying to get or convince enough Canadian people to get on board. If this guy can just give a good, solid enough message, and we can get enough Canadians to support this, and that'll create the political cover we need, to enter into that foray even deeper and to cause even more or escalate even more potential death, devastation, and destruction. And like I say, it's very disturbing that seems to be what's driving a lot of people in this country. These people seem mentally disturbed, and there seems to be something underlying within them. I don't like to attribute like pure malice or evilness to just anybody, but it does exist, and there are definitely people who are putting that on public display these days.
This whole thing about the Azov Battalion, when the Ukraine joined the World War II, let's put the map up here so we can talk at the map finally.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. So this was the prediction from, I don't know, what was it, day 2 of the war? And he looks like he's done even worse than I would have done with his stuff. But let's go to Dave Dismantle's comment about the Azov Battalion regiment. Yes, there are neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Guess what? There are neo-Nazis in Poland. There are neo-Nazis in Slovakia. There are neo-Nazis in Hungary. There are neo-Nazis down the street from me in Montana. Okay? If you are a free person in a society where free speech is valued, you are not going to eliminate all crazy ideas. So, again, making the pointing at a group, ethnocentrism, pointing at a group and say the Nazis are bad. Well, Nazis as a mentality radical Islam is a mentality. People who believe in the spaghetti monster as a set of that's an ideology. As human beings, we are never going to escape bad ideas from the past.
Yeah.
But here's the scary part: is what you're talking about with the emotionalism and the manipulation and the biased stories. This is exactly what Goebbels used to get the German people angry enough to give Hitler power. And if people aren't today going, look, guys, like, Putin loves his kids. Russians are kind people. Let's not lump them all in together. And like you said before, by whitewashing them all as guilty, you are demoralizing and attacking the few Russians or many Russians in the group that agree with you and not with Putin.
Yeah.
If you want to be on the side of good and light and prosperity for all, then you can't throw out your opinions of groups and say, but what if? What about these guys? They're wrong. They're just people like you are. They're manipulating things for their own success like you are. So let's throw that silliness away.
Yeah. And can I just point out too, when you're talking about it's another thing I've been thinking quite deeply about this is, and because it's the same thing in any historical context, when it's basically, you're talking almost like when people say you're scared of anarchy, although it's in reality, it's just lack of rulers, no rules. But what people's pretense of anarchy, where it's just a free fall for all for anything. Well, in times of war and conflict, those are those times that the opportunism or the opportunities of very, very bad actors. So right now, it's not just the Russian military, right? The guys that wear actual Russian uniforms, right? And then the Ukrainian military who actually wear Ukrainian military, right, gear. Those aren't the only two people who are you're going to see this conflict. As with every civil conflict in the past and ones that I will expect going forward, is the opportunism that very bad actors, right? So even if it's like you're suggesting, it's not to say that all of the Ukrainian military is just a bunch of Nazis or fascists. No, but there are those people in that country who at this point in time are definitely taking advantage of. So who are the people that they loathe, right? So they would be the LGBTQ type community, because they have a lot of disdain for them, right? Or what they call in the West today BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, people of color. So they're probably not too much Indigenous, but at least, Black. And, there are those people that live in places like Ukraine, maybe not, to huge numbers, but what these conflicts do, and the breakdown of genuine, I'm talking genuine law and order, of where people just respect each other and stuff, is yes, these are very opportunistic times for some very, very bad actors, like from the right or left or anywhere in between, to carry out it's basically like their purge time, right? So this is their opportunity to go after the people that they've wanted to go after for a long time. So like I say, there's a lot of things that are happening that we're not privy to in the reports, because the media is going to only be representing the big macro picture in terms of the major conflict. But there's a million other micro stories that are happening and playing out day in, day out, and not just in Ukraine, but in Russia, like family conflicts now, right? That are going to now argue over sides that they're going to take in their positions. And who knows what that might escalate to. So to me, this is the part that I think is most disturbing is, and I think I covered this in the last time we had the thing, where the fuck are the adults in the room, right? That are literally like, because to me, that's what genuine leadership qualities represent, is someone that should be willing to say, and just sit down, be brutally honest with the people and forthright, and keep everyone's egos and their, if just their egos in check, right? Just a little bit, but I'm not seeing that today. It's literally broken down to like everything we've seen, where it's, you got to pick one side or the other. It's pro or con, and there's literally no room at all for any gray area or any middle room. And that's the part that I think is most disturbing. That's the void that we're trying to fill. The problem is, though, Dave, is we're trying desperately, and we're not the only ones. We're trying to fill that void, but here we are over here. Our voices are so suppressed, right? And,
yes.
And it's not we might as well be, and I'm glad at least we do have some people that we can bounce our ideas off. but we're not getting, and what we have to say is probably something that a lot of Canadians, Americans, or a lot of other people really need to hear. Problem is we're our voices are so heavily suppressed that it's really difficult for this kind of information to get out to people. So I to be honest with you, I don't know what we can do other than in some of these alternative platforms and trying to help educate, inform, enlighten our fellow citizens as to like this. Stop playing sides when you're talking about a conflict and start thinking critically about what do these conflicts represent? How many people, how many lives, how many businesses, and this isn't just like I say now, even when you tally up the numbers, like let's say this conflict ends and you tally up the numbers of Russians, Ukrainians that died, this is going to play into the minds and the psychology of the Ukrainian and the Russian people for generations. So
yes,
like I say, can we just tamp down the ridiculous this rhetoric of us versus them and get some real adults in the room?
Well, here's brutal truth number one that our Canadian politicians won't own. They talked about on Question Period this morning. I saw a couple of clips on Twitter, and Candice Bergen believed that we should be spending more on the military, and then Sean Fraser, I think his name is, MP Liberal, said yes, we should invest more in the military. My friends, it's too late. Putin's already called our bluff. He attacked neutral Ukraine. He has restrained himself from nuking Poland for sending supplies over. It's too late. See, the irony, and this is why you need actual grown-ups in the room instead of hysterical people. The truth is if we now increase our NATO spending to 2% of GDP, what do you think it looks like to Russia? Mm-hmm. It looks like we're going to attack. This is the worst time to do it. In fact, maybe we should tamp it down to 0.5% for a year, so we roll over and play dead like Trudeau's willing to do. Because all he's willing to do is emote on it and then let other people take the consequences for his stupidity. Yeah. I squarely blame Obama, Biden, Trudeau, anyone that propped up or sold happy talk to Zelensky or his predecessor. And I was going to mention this. There are 2 movies on Rumble by Oliver Stone, Ukraine on Fire and Ukraine Revealed. You watch those to explain exactly what those presidents of Ukraine went through in their negotiations with the EU and Russia.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Dave, because actually what I did do, and I thought this was really important. So I'll say definitely check out the Oliver Stone one, but I myself even recognized there were some aspects of it, and this is the important part, but there was another one. While I was looking for that one, I found this other one that was actually had more of a pro-Ukrainian lens to it, more or less, right? And it showed it actually from the protesters at the time, like during Maidan, when the whole 2014 thing was taking place, and it was called Something on Fire too, because like I say, I was looking for the Oliver Stone one, and it came up. I wish I could remember the name of it, but I would definitely recommend Ukraine on Fire. That's it. Here, one sec here. Let me see if I can find that. And I would definitely say to watch both of them, because you that way you get kind of both perspectives. Yep, it's called Ukraine on Fire. Let me see here. Oh, you can actually watch it on YouTube, full feature. Yeah, it's the whole thing on, I guess, Netflix on YouTube. Yeah, Netflix, I guess, has a channel on YouTube. Just one sec here. I'll bring this up.
So one of the comments here from Barry Prince, they're all the same snake. Well, Bennett was talking about opportunity. Who do you think in our society are the people that are going to benefit from the opportunity of war in Ukraine? Is it the Red Cross? No, it's going to be defense contractors and politicians. And if they can fool you into going over there and fighting and dying for Ukraine, not your family. Mm-hmm. So, if you don't take the time to understand the background, and a lot of times we just don't spend enough time paying attention to history. We want to launch in and help people.
Okay, I just brought it off there. I just wanted to show it to the people there real quick there, Dave. Oh, sorry.
Do your thing.
Whoops.
But
Sorry.
yeah.
There we go. It's okay. I hit the wrong. I removed you instead of the other one. Sorry.
That's all right.
There we go. We're back. Okay. But yeah, it's called Ukraine on Fire. So definitely check it out.
Yeah. Let's go to the map and just talk about it quickly.
Yep. Okay.
So this was the battle plan I predicted he would do. And let's go to the next slide. Because we have to get to the point that I promised we'd talk about last time and then didn't. And then we made it the title of this one. And then for an hour, we've done libertarian stuff to appease the masses for their libertarian junk feed for the day. Okay. So Putin is nowhere near completing any objective that would be militarily significant. And he's done, his guys have done some completely insane things like attack a building at a nuclear power plant. Like that just shows you. So if you think Putin is responsible for every good or bad thing that goes on in Ukraine, you're really not thinking, because do you honestly think the president of Russia would say, hey guys, go ahead and open up fire on a building beside a nuclear power plant? Like that is beyond insane. And the worst part is, as going back to the Western media emotional, hysterical, one-sided, unfair description of the situation. Look, they only show you Ukrainian mothers crying and Ukrainian kids and Ukrainian casualties. They don't show you dead Russian soldiers. And I'll guarantee you there's lots of them floating around out there that have paid the price. They thought they were going on a Western exercise. Suddenly they're across the border in Ukraine. And I suspect he sent his conscripts in, his least capable troops in first. And the messy business of that was, by surprise, he allowed them to probably make some gains they wouldn't have made if the Ukrainians were ready. But because they were green troops, they probably died faster than they would have had they had a little more seasoning. So, right. And then he sent in the VDV, which are his top guys. But if you look at the map, this is Kyiv and Ukraine. Obviously, the red bits are what has been invaded. I made the prediction that, Yemen. Yeah, we can get to that later. Yemen and Palestine. Yeah, it's ironic that suddenly now we're looking at Ukraine. They were bombing weddings in Yemen. Like, what kind of insane person bombs a wedding just because 2 or 3 people from some group are going to be at that wedding? Yeah. That's just sick. Anyways, let's go back to this, but Dave dismantled. We can talk about that later. All right.
Yeah, actually, Ron Paul, I can't remember the exact word. Well, I think, was it blowback? Yeah, might be just the simple term of blowback. That's what you basically end up having, like you say, from doing these invasions where, you know what I mean? It's an actual full-on type invasions, and you're causing a lot of civil harm to the actual civilian population, whether it's done intentionally or not, or whether, like you're saying, they're just trying to take out a specific target. But yes, you actually create a lot of blowback, like you say, because that family that you blew up at the wedding, they might have been fans of Western countries, maybe might have strived to assimilate to that kind of culture themselves. But after they got their family blown up by that very same Western culture, well, that changes their mindset and their perception of that culture. So yeah, there's a lot of blowback that comes from some of these entangling alliances and foreign interventions. But yes,
the term the British Empire used to use was hearts and minds. Right. So the British Empire would roll up with their boats. They'd come ashore with a couple of units. They'd knock over some people. They put the locals in power, and they would be very careful that they weren't using their own power against the locals. Right. For fear of damaging the hearts and minds campaign of the locals. There was a commenter on India that said, listen, the whole notion that Britain conquered India, just the Indian subcontinent, is an absolute absurdity, because they were so outnumbered. It wouldn't have taken more than half of the slums of Mumbai to attack and to kill every British soldier. The reality is that the Indian upper class and middle class became aligned to the system under British rule, and they were quite happy to go along and be police officers on the street for Queen Victoria, because it was a way to get power for themselves. We're seeing the same sort of opportunism in Ukraine. So what you were saying about hearts and minds and Putin, remember, if you watch these two videos, Ukraine on Fire and Ukraine Revealed, the eastern side, the eastern sort of C section, like where all the red bits are, this is where the pro-Russian, Russian-speaking Ukrainians live. So if you were a descendant Russian who's lived in Kharkiv for 300 years, and Putin just flattened your house and killed your grandma, your viewpoint of Russia is not positive anymore. And this is what I mean about, as we go transform into hybrid war, this is where the real casualties are going to start stacking up on the Russian side. Because remember, they will be occupiers that are hated by everyone who was damaged or destroyed or whatever. They were saying yesterday that Russians were grabbing every sort of military age male in one of the cities, cutting up their passports and taking them to Russia. Well, why do you think that is? It's because they're taking any possible insurgent out of the territory they want to control. So, his military has not lived. No, so this is another disinformation that you should be very mindful of. And CNN is the worst at it, but Fox News is just as bad in some cases, and a lot of it has to do with these generals. My God, these generals don't even know what they're talking about. Let me just say this: if somebody says they're a general, that doesn't mean they're very good at being a general. It just means they've been around long enough to be there. Yeah. If you look at this map of Ukraine, all these generals and so on are saying, he's General Keane and Spider Marks. He's annihilating Ukrainian forces. I'll say to you this: Guderian, who was an actual successful blitzkrieg general, wouldn't see that map and make that conclusion that these guys are making. They don't understand what they're saying. So
I was just brought up Dale Johnson's comment there. So Putin has canceled 13 Canadians, including JT and CF. So yeah, that's the one that they put on his blacklist, I guess. And not all Canadians. Also, I heard Russia sent a message to the West with a hypersonic guided missile. Yes. Well, that definitely is far. I haven't seen the confirmed reports, but I did see that reported early in the week that there was one of those hypersonic missiles that were used, and that is actually one of the few areas where Russia does have a slight, as far as I know, unless there's some secret stuff that I'm not aware of, but they do seem to have a slight advantage to the West and even to China in terms of their development of this hypersonic missile. So that's quite disturbing as well, right?
Well, so China and Russia both have hypersonic missiles. Mach 5.
So it's a
they work together.
It's a joint one. Okay, right on.
Yeah. But so you'll see this when they talk about Russia has put Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. Sorry for his long-term profitability outlook, and all these Democrats on the cancel list, but they haven't put key Republicans on. So that's the message that Putin is trying to send to our American friends. Look, we know. Listen, don't you tell us about oligarchs and corruption, okay, buddy? We know what it looks like.
Yeah.
Those Democrats are corrupt as hell, and they've been canceled because they deserve it. They were the ones propping up, convincing Zelensky to fight a good fight. And really, the sick thing that's going on in Ukraine now, whether we accepted it or not, and certainly by no one's authorization, we didn't vote for this. We didn't vote for a strategy in Ukraine, which is what, if you wanted to have a military operation in a foreign country, you would start by getting together people, understanding what your national interests are, understanding how they align with things inside that country, put them together, and then you have a long-term strategy that gets implemented over the years. What it looks like is they have lied Obama, Trudeau, maybe even Harper, they've lied to the Ukrainian leadership about NATO on the horizon coming to help. And all that's done is allowed Ukraine to be used as a punching bag for Russia.
Yep.
And so the lies being told on our side, we must be vigilant and we must hold those people accountable, because that's the kind of stuff that starts a war. That is what starts all this hardship. And it's not us libertarians that do that.
Right.
We haven't, like you said, we haven't had grown-ups in the room for 7 years in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And I don't see, no opinion is absolute, but I haven't seen Pierre Poilievre act like a prime minister. I'd like to be prime minister. I would act far more maturely than he's been acting. And that's because I've offered a peace deal. What is going to happen at the end of this is Ukraine is going to be cut in half, militarily speaking. They already have an ethnic Russian side. They already have an ethnic Ukrainian side, which is that Azov battalion, neo-Nazi included group. But I'm not going to call it a monolithic thing. So I saw this in Yugoslavia. I saw this in Bihać. I saw it in Sarajevo. I saw it in Banja Luka. I saw it in Mostar. I was there and saw what happened. You cut it down ethnic lines, but realistically, the militarily significant feature in the middle of Ukraine is the Dnieper River and waterways. Like if you look where I had those green circles on that's fine, just leave it here. Militarily speaking, where you have something where you have like a bridge where you can fortify from people coming from one side to the other, that's where people feel safe enough with their defenses. It's like a castle in medieval times, where you position your stuff so far back that if you hear that they're coming, you can rush forward to your defenses. Yeah. I'll tell you one thing that demonstrates how sadly unprepared the Ukrainians were, and how, if I was a Ukrainian, I'd be equally mad at Zelensky now, even though the West is playing him as a God-sent savior, is where was our defensive planning to make sure we were not going to get rolled up by the Russians in 3 weeks or 5 weeks or 6 weeks? I mean, maybe Putin was overestimating his 2-day sneak attack sort of thing, but it seems like he's been chewing up a whole bunch of ground quite happily on his own. Where was our fortification in depth? I don't know if you've ever been to Germany. In the Cold War era, they had tumble blocks, they had bridge demolitions, they had, like, the entire country was ready to be knocked down, all the defensive areas, so you could instantaneously defend them. If you have like a convoy of Russian Spetsnaz forces that flies into an airport near Kyiv, or drives down a road and gets all the way to the city center, or the suburbs, that's a real problem. You have not been properly defended. And I will give credit to Donald Trump that he gave military aid to the Ukrainians. I shudder to think how much worse they would have done if they hadn't had what they have now.
Actually,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, because you brought up a point, and actually that was actually the original thing we were supposed to be covering for this, is urban warfare and conflict in the major cities, because that was another thing that you were going to bring up. But before you do that, because you brought up Harper, and then seeing today, and of course people like Poilievre would accuse the Trudeau Liberals, rightfully so, for doing basically what he's doing as well, is when your principles are so lacking, and you've created this. It's the problem with countries where you create this thing in terms of all this diversity and stuff. Is diversity is fine, but underneath any kind of diversity, like in my family, I like diversity too, but underlying, there should be some baseline principles, right? If there's not baseline principles, like, okay, we're not going to kill each other, we're not going to steal from each other, right? If you don't have any baseline principles, well, you end up in the situation where all politicians today, no matter whether they come from the left or right, they just look at what the polls are suggesting. And what I'm seeing with Poilievre is, normally you would kind of think of he being one of the few ones that seems like he wants to stick to his principles. And for the most part, when he's talking about economics, he does seem to have a principled position on economics, but he also seems to be willing to go with wherever the wind is flowing in terms of popular support, right? And that's the part. Now, to me, if your whole thing is freedom, 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 which is what he's bringing about, right? Freedom is the pretense, and that is actually the greatest thing that you can unify people under, right? Because it's everything. It's something that all human beings want. Even if they accuse other people of having a different interpretation of freedom, every person wants to be free themselves. So that's a great message. But then once again, when you talk about some of the things that he's offered up, right? So bringing in, like, he's a big fan of the mass immigration thing, right? So now I get that you're catering to, if you're a business owner, right, on the economic side of things, this is the problem with trying to please everyone, right? Without being principled is, yes, if you're a business owner, it sounds great to have a large influx of immigrants to the tune of 400,000 a year. I mean, come on, that's a lot of people, potential talent to pluck, right? And because there's such a large number of them, right, and they're all vying for the position, well, you can keep wages somewhat suppressed. Whereas, and then same with the military, he's banging the war drums because he must recognize that there are some conservatives or people that he'd consider part of the conservative base that would support that. But once again, you're leaving out the people. Like I say, there are certain things when you're taking the war measure and you're trying to, like Pierre wants to create this big blue tent. Well, like I say, without your principles guiding you, like I'm with you, Pierre. If freedom is your thing, I'll follow you down that road and any lane or avenue it takes you. But the minute your freedom goes against the very things that bring you freedom, which is not, preemptive conflict, or not entering into conflicts needlessly, right?
Okay, so
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Let me show my rebuttal to all those. Number one,
yep.
Mass immigration. Mm-hmm. At a time when you have historic inflation and house prices, what is that going to do? Is that going to make the lives of every Canadian better?
Worse.
At a time when cheaper labor can come in and undercut you and you get laid off. Yeah. Is any of that sound like it's pro-Canadian interest? No. The truth is
business interest, but not working interest.
No. Mass immigration is a cure for global corporations to keep selling things inside our markets.
Yeah.
It's to keep the profits of Sony up, even if they don't have a factory here in town. That's the truth. That is the knockdown effect. If you're pro-immigration, you can't be pro-climate change. Why? Because Canadians are some of the highest carbon emitters on the planet. So if you want more Canadians, clearly you want to kill the planet. But that's okay, because China is putting on one coal-fired electrical power plant every other week. So no matter if you feel good walking into Tim Hortons instead of going through the drive-through, China is wiping out your entire year's CO2 emissions in about 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing about freedom.
Yeah.
I fully supported the idea of allowing ISIS fighters to go and fight in Syria. Mm-hmm. Go with God, do your thing. I would not stop anyone who wanted to go and fight for Ukraine. I would say, Godspeed, good luck. That's freedom. So if you're starting to manipulate immigration rules with that and refuse to allow Russian immigrants in, that's silly. That's anti-freedom. So Pierre Poilievre has done nothing that demonstrates he understands what individual freedom is and what Canadian individual freedom interests are. Over government, what happened to cell phone bills? Every time they allow these corporations to merge and then lay off staff so they can increase their profitability, your and my cell phone bill goes up.
Yep.
I never got a 50% reduction in my phone bill. I'm sure you didn't either. So on all these issues, you want to rattle the stick and threaten Russia. Where was Pierre Poilievre demanding that we increase funding for the military when it mattered? It's like saying we're going to build a fire hall after City Hall is burned down.
Yeah.
There's no mental gymnastics you can do to justify exactly what you're saying you're going to do with the reality on the ground. It's nonsense. These people he hasn't cared about making things better for people, and especially if he's in for mass migration. He can't be for the climate if he's for mass migration. He can't be for the housing inflation if he's for mass migration, and he can't be for crowdedness in major urban centers, reducing that if he's for mass immigration and even military stuff. I mean, so you're going to spend it on a military. So let me understand this correctly. Russia has already invaded Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
The ship has sailed. Now you're going to increase military spending? For what? What purpose? It's going to take 5-10 years for that to work in. Are you planning to attack Russia in 5 years? Here's the secret of good leadership in government. Is not somebody who is toing and froing to the important cause du jour. It is somebody who is looking ahead and planning ahead and putting in place things that when that situation arises, it's already taken care of.
Mm.
And do we have that? Can you say, can you put your hand on your heart and say, yes, Trudeau is looking out for my interests 10 years from now?
Not in the slightest.
Yeah. And so this is where we're at. So if that's the kind of people you've got in Ottawa, do you seriously want them meddling in a war in another country?
Mm. I hear you, Dave. But actually, I was curious because you had mentioned about the urban warfare thing and
Yes.
mega cities, and I was just curious to know, because that's one area, like I say, I'm not familiar with. Like I say, I've never been in the military. I'm not familiar with tactics or methods based on whether it's urban or rural warfare or whatever, So what exactly, like, where were we going with that? Is it the difficulty? Because I'm sure that those are lessons probably learned, many times over by the Western Allies in recent years, right?
Okay, so what you and this goes to the whole thing about informing the public,
right?
And being aware. There's another video series by Oliver Stone, yep. And it's called The Unwritten History of America, and he talks about issues, especially World War II, with a more worldly view than a pro-American view.
Right.
And if you watch that, you will find out that it was the Russians, by and large, that won most of World War II. They faced the most German divisions. They suffered the most casualties. They moved the goalposts the farthest against Germany, allowing the West to have relatively, I'm not saying it was easy, a relatively easy advance to Berlin from the West. So why is that important? Because we have to be very careful how we're dealing with the Russians. They are a nuclear power, and they also have a lot of pride. They call World War II the Great Patriotic War because it was so miserable and because so many of their people were savagely taken away from their own lives. And they deserve our respect, whether or not we agree with their position and their oligarchs versus Bill Gates, our oligarchs. Winter on Fire. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just adding them both so that people know.
So, okay, so mega cities. So one of the things I've been researching the past couple of years is mega cities. I'm by no means not the only. I never came up with this idea. I saw it on some U.S. Army stuff from 1993. They've been thinking about it for many years. Then they got distracted with other problems. The reality on the ground. Can we go to the next slide?
Yep.
So the reality on the ground is this.
I see. Just give it 1 second there, Dave, because okay, there, we're okay now. My internet connection was doing a little bit of a.
No worries. So, okay, if you want to understand about why they call it, the Americans call it the urban canyon, why urban warfare is so difficult. Imagine you are a buck private. You are a private with a rifle. And you are standing in the middle of this area, and suddenly you hear a shot, and you hear it whizzing past your face. Where did it come from? It echoed off every concrete surface, every glass pane, everything in there before it hit your ears. Do you have any certainty that you'd be able to respond to fire, or would you be able to run halfway across the road and escape from fire coming at you? This is the problem of built up areas, as we used to call it. We in my old army days, we called it FIBUA, fighting in built up areas. Well, this is worse than guerrilla warfare. So what I'm saying is this: the landscape inside a city is not what our military forces were designed for. Our mechanized forces and the Russians' mechanized forces were designed for some place in Germany called the Fulda Gap, which was farmland with a couple of farmhouses and buildings, large open fields, rock walls every so often, clumps of trees, rolling hills, that kind of stuff. It was engaged warfare where you can see 2, 3, 4, 5 kilometers out, where your radar works, where your optics work. Now imagine you're in a tank at the bottom of those skyscrapers. You know how long you're going to last as a tank if they have rocket launchers anywhere on those buildings? Like literally 20. I don't even think you'd have enough time to spin your gun around. So this is the reality of why Putin and the Russian invasion has not gone as well as I'm sure he expected. But also, getting back to your point about misinformation, there's lots of people on Fox News and CNN jumping on the Russians, showing how, well, they're not 10 feet tall and all this sort of stuff. Listen, buddy, I got news for you. Our guys wouldn't do much better. And if you think when we invaded Western Germany, even in Holland, even in Belgium, if you don't think that our artillery wasn't shattering towns, that our bombers weren't crushing whole neighborhoods in the advance of troops going forward, then you are gravely miscalculating what the truth was. Because built up areas are very hard to fight in, and you need a numerical superiority, which means you have to outnumber the defenders in order to beat them. So you need upwards of 10 to 1 in order to defeat somebody in a city. So 10 soldiers to find one guy and kill him. Probably 6 or 7 are going to be shot along the way. 2 are going to suppress him, and one guy's going to throw the grenade in the room that knocks him out. That is the reality of built up areas. So if you go back to, can we go back to the map of, up one slide, please. So if you understand where he's gone, Putin, he's done a multi-pronged attack. He has, in fact, been able to link up one side with the other along the southeast corridor near Crimea. But everywhere along there, Europe is built up. Let's go forward a slide, please. Forward another. Okay. So what we were looking at is, if you think of all the population on the Earth, over half the population, over half of the entire Earth's population exists on the Asian side of this map. Those are red, orange, and yellow dots representing megacities. This is where eventually there's going to be a global crisis, a global war, where it's India versus China, China versus India, China versus Taiwan and Japan counterattacks, and so on and so forth. This is built up area. Okay, this is urban fighting in all those centers. You've got old, poorly designed streets, old buildings, all that sort of stuff. Can we go down one slide? Okay, this is what they call an occupancy map. So this charts out, obviously this is Western Europe, but the size and scale of those red poles tells you the density of the people. Oh, sorry, Dave. You cannot possibly understand or live the NAP if you think government should exist. My friend, I need somebody with a nuclear weapon somewhere, and I'm okay with it. Okay, so in this map, you've seen the result of 70 years of urbanization and rebuild after World War II. And some of those red spikes on the east, those are actually in Ukraine. Okay, so here's the thing: if you have a numerical advantage and you can see the enemy forces off in the distance, 2 kilometers away, so a tank can shoot about 3.5 kilometers. With rocket assisted projectiles. A tow missile goes out to 3750 and then the wire snaps. So about 4 kilometers. So when you're engaging at that kind of distance, if you've got helicopters and stuff, you can find your enemy, you can fix your enemy, and then you can finish the enemy where they're at. Okay. Now, when you get into a city, you could be receiving fire from some building behind your back as you're driving down a road 3 blocks over. You don't know where the strike is going to happen, and so that's the problem. Is you are never able to you're never able to completely suppress enemy fire from coming in. So this is the problem. So he's been attacking with conventional. Putin has been attacking with conventional forces. And he has made the mistake of going after urban areas. And I suspect that this was a political decision and not a military decision. Because, we talked about before about hearts and minds. Some unit comes up to the edge of an urban area, and they know that if they go down the streets, or perhaps the first couple of units that did go down those streets got wiped out by the defenders. So then they bring up their artillery and start pounding all of those buildings. Well, every time you rubble a building, every time you make a street impassable, every time you collapse things that aren't supposed to be, you give people an infinite number of hiding spots to be ready to attack you, ambush you, IEDs, rocket launchers, whatever. And then you've lost all your advantages. So if you have armored vehicles and they can shoot people 800 meters off, you bring them into a city, they can barely shoot 50 feet. So, these people on the news that are gloating about how badly the Russians are doing, our guys wouldn't do any better. And we've been working on this problem for many years. It is so hard to defeat people when you have no advantages. Your armored vehicle doesn't give you an advantage. The range of your weapons don't give you an advantage. Okay, so you literally become bogged down. Now the real problem here that's been hidden is Russia's forces don't have a lot of infantry soldiers in their armored vehicles. They have minimum man crews, and so why that's important is when you come into a city, like in order to take it over, you literally have to dismount every infanteer and put them in the buildings. They have to clear floor by floor up to the top, cover each other, go to the next building floor by floor up to the top, and so on and so forth. None of that can be done in a blitzkrieg. None of that can be done very quickly. Okay? By the way, I'm not sure if Scott Ritter finished third on his tactics course, but I finished third. So in a group of my own peers, I'm not too shabby a tactical thinker in any case.
Oh, I do want to say before you continue on there, just so that I make sure because I wouldn't want Dave to think that I just ignored what he's saying. Because I actually, as a libertarian, I definitely am in agreement with Dave. But I think the big thing here, Dave, is I wouldn't suggest that anyone here is advocating for the state. And it's just that I've had these disagreements and arguments with other libertarians too, because I, just like you, Dave, I have an ideal in my mind, and I wish for that ideal to exist so desperately. Like, it really is. It's one of those things. Is if I could just bring that reality to fruition, it would be so nice, right? But unfortunately,
we talked about this before. I would describe myself as a Gary Johnson libertarian. I believe in driver's licenses. So we all make compromises from the ideal. And the argument we used last time, or the first time, is I argued that one of the biggest problems with libertarian ideals is they all fall victim to a sovereign state working against you. In other words, we talked about, I think I made this example. What if the Chinese Communist Party sent 300 million Chinese immigrants to Mexico to walk across the border and become U.S. citizens? Then in a generation, they all decide to vote to make the U.S. a vassal state of China.
Well, actually, though, that would actually make the argument for Dave, the other side of it, because if there's no state, there's no way they can vote one way or the other. So,
well, actually, okay, so Dave, here's my response to that. Instead of 300 million immigrants, he just sends Xi Jinping sends 300 million people with rifles.
Well, but see that there too is the whole reason why heaven, and of course it was the founding fathers, so they were statists themselves, mind you. But the idea that they implemented was still the idea, which I agree, and you don't need the state. I mean, a statist saw the idea, but that's neither here nor there. But having a population of well-armed individuals and people who actually understand the importance of defending yourself against foreign aggressors, not just domestic, is if you have that, like I say, one thing I've noticed, and I've heard arguments from all sides, is it's much easier to take over state apparatuses because you just basically, look at they just went there. Walensky or the Zelensky guy just says, "Hey, look, I'm the new ruler," right? I'm the one that now gets to control everybody in Ukraine. Whereas if you remove that, like the however many millions of people in Ukraine, the problem is though, and I'll push back against my own self, is when we're creating these thought concepts in our minds of a place, let's say a jurisdiction like Canada that is absent of the state, which I would love to see come to exist or fruition someday. The problem is the only way that works out properly is if everyone else kind of does the same thing, right?
Okay, so here's the argument that pops your bubble. In order to force states to do nothing but conventional warfare, somebody must have nuclear weapons. Because nuclear weapons up the stakes in the game to mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
In other words, it doesn't matter if you have 300 million infantry and I have 1 million infantry. All it takes is one strategic barrage and you don't have 300 million infantry anymore. You see? So while we like and we want to drive our society forward, and like you and I are doing as libertarians, we're discussing these issues in the large, in the wild of reality. Like I find one of the things that puts me off a lot of libertarians and their mentality, not that I don't find them agreeable people, is they just live in an ideological bubble. And until we're all ready to jump in that bubble, we all have to live in the reality that exists. And in that case, mutually assured destruction is actually the way that you stop wars from going out of control.
Yeah, actually, I would say push back, and I would say actually the one thing I know is about libertarians, it would be great if they all lived in this, but it's not really actually libertarians. And this is the problem why libertarians, when they try to affect anything where they're going to affect political change, where you find out, see, this is where the mantra, the underlying aspect of what makes a libertarian, which is their individual, they're unapologetic, right? Individualistic. That's the thing, which is why it's like people have said, and I've said it myself, is it's like basically trying to akin to herd cats, right? That's the one thing actually is the downfall, although it's a very positive thing in most aspects and areas in life, because we're very unique and what we provide and offer, like I say, is genuine diversity of thought, opinion, perspective, stuff. And all that we really have at the end of the day are those underlying principles. Now, the principles are the things that I think is much more representation of. So in Canada, what I want to happen eventually, and this is why my whole mantra and a thing the cover photo and stuff that a guy drew up for me, and I've said it for years, and I had my own little thing, was we don't require, or liberty requires evolution, not revolution. And what it is how to me, the way I picture how the state ceases to exist is not by warring factions dominating other libertarians outvoting the status, right? I think what it happens is, like I say, it's all freedom. Genuinely, it's a state of mind. And what it is right now, the state was the apparatus that replaced. So religion, Christianity, historically was where humans or Western humans got our morality from, our ethics, our underlying principles that we all shared in common, or that was the concept, right? Now that was replaced by the state. The state was the new the new church, the new religion. That's where you get your morality, your edicts, and all. Well, like I say, because the reason why none of this works out, just like with the religion in the past and the new religion, aka the state of the present, is because they both left exceptions and inconsistencies in the morality based on the people who were trying to put them forth. Whereas libertarians, the amazing thing that libertarians have done, and it seems simple, but it's literally taken decades after decades of intellectual thought and vigor to get us to the point is, how can we have a society, a cohesive society that doesn't have this thing called the state or people who represent the state? Because the state is a monopoly of violence. So what you're doing is you're voting to give people the authority to use violence as a means to their end. Now, if we can create an area where Canadians, like, even though historically this was called Canada by the statists, but if the people that live in these jurisdictions, rather than recognizing the authority of the state, but we recognize the authority of the NAP, of the ideas, right, of the non-aggression principle, self-ownership, and property rights. If that becomes your new rallying force, and that's the beautiful thing about ideas, is it's just like the concept of God in its proper original form. Is it's out of this world. It's just a concept. Whereas the government, it theoretically sounds like it's just a concept, but there's a bunch of people walking around that say that they're government, right? So at least with the idea, right, rather than government that's actually has a physical presence on the earth, right, which are people that, put on their suit and ties and call themselves politicians. Whereas the idea of the non-aggression principle, self-ownership, property rights, those ideas, those underlying principles, if we could rally around behind that, then that is what creates the unity and cohesion without having to have this big giant monopoly of force in the room that's constantly waving and pointing it all over the place at each other, right?
That and all of that is non-disputable. It's a valid way to move forward. Right. Unfortunately,
you have to
no one else will put their weapons down and allow you to take it as it is.
That's true. Yep.
So let's talk about
that's where I'm with you, and I agree, and that's why I used to be so purist in the libertarian philosophy that I will even admit, and I apologize for, I've probably pushed back and turned away many small L minarchist libertarians, and I apologize for that, because like you're saying, I've grown in intellect over the years and thought, and I realized, no, you need those people. Like you say, not everyone's willing to put down their guns, right? And at the very least, what we can do is, don't hate on the people that still have that inkling, but maybe you want to get those people on side with your kind of thinking, right? Right.
Well, I think that's why, I put my name in the ring for the CPC leadership, although there's no way I'm going to be able to raise enough money to actually stay in it. Is you have to have people willing to parade, demonstrate why this philosophy works better and why it's more mainstream and more centrist than either the left wing and the right wing realize. So, but let's go back to Dave Dismantled's point here. If the government has a nuke, then I should be able to too. Until such time as everyone was a libertarian, I would say that's it. At some point, I would agree, but we're not there in the maturity level if we've got roaming bands of people stealing from stores, knocking down old ladies, and so on and so forth. The morality of the core of every human being in a society has to be at the point where everyone is understanding of the right and equality in the sense of sameness of everyone in society. If you have a group of people that will use their nuclear weapon to take what they want, it's just anarchy. It's basically allowing. No, getting to
actually that's pure state.
Yeah, exactly. Statism. There you go. So here's one of the ironies of all this hysterical, over-the-top non-thinking that's going on with Ukraine. We are literally taking weapons, anti-tank missiles, anti-aircraft missiles that you and I as citizens cannot own. And we are loading them up in trucks, flying them over in planes, loading them into trucks, and giving them to a bunch of do-it-yourself soldiers on the front lines of a war. And somehow people don't have a problem with this.
Yeah.
You and I can't own one, but they're going to give a bunch, again, with your monopoly of violence, government justification, to a bunch of people that may not know how to use them.
Yeah.
They
Actually,
hide them in their basement
yeah.
and, use them on their neighbor 10 years from now.
Yeah, actually, what Stuart, and thanks for joining the stream there, Stuart. But what Stuart just brought up actually is something that, and I don't know if we've talked about this before too, but this separation thing is actually something I think is profoundly important, and it would work with the whole Ukraine thing. And just like in Canada, this is the part that, so like I say, when you're talking about society, the state, and the people, in reality, it's like the macro level of the parents and the children, right? The family unit, but the pretense of the whole state as being this new apparatus part of the unit. So think about even in your own situation. And we guarantee lots of people that are watching this stream right now, and maybe yourself, Dave, have met or were part, maybe you were that person. I know I was, who grew up with your parents fighting, bickering, just couldn't get along. My parents actually got a divorce when I was 8 years old. Now, I can't imagine any point in time when it got to the point where they just could not stand each other, to the point where there was nonstop argument verbally, and even when it gets to the point where it escalates up into the physical violence, right? I mean, the simplest, and anyone would accept this, religious, atheist, anyone in between, is in the most difficult situation like that, where it doesn't seem like there's any room for commonality or where you can find some form of unity. The only thing that you really have left, like other than fighting all the time, right? Or is literally to at least create your own space and remove yourself from that particular situation, right? That is, I think, a good thing and a good idea, which is why, to me, it should be not just the sovereignty of the state, but the sovereignty of the individual. And if Ontario, like I say, if you want to go into the provincial side of it, if Ontario, although that's the thing when you say Ontario, but what about the people within Ontario? That's why if you're going to break things down into separation, it has to go all the way down to the individual for it to be ultimately fair and for equality to actually exist. Is everybody should be able to vacate, right? Forced association is, to me, I mean, is that not a form of slavery? If you're forced to associate with people, and not just associate in terms of having to live with you, but in the welfare state is to pay for them, to prop them up, to subsidize their life, right? This is the thing. And I think that is an area to reduce the conflict. Because like I say, parents that did get a divorce, even though it was ugly and it wasn't great, and of course the best outcome would have been for them to find some way to come together, right? To keep the family unit cohesive. But in the absence of that, the only genuine pretense for peace is to, at least for each party or person, to have the ability to, like I say, vacate being forced into that association. And that, I think, is just like with Ukraine, this forced association, whether it's with Russia or whether it's with the EU or NATO. That's the part that, me, if I had advice for the Ukrainian people, is, yeah, don't be looking to be entangling into any of these behemoths, because it's only going to be a detriment to you and your society at the end of the day, because once again, you have to pick from lessers of evils, whereas individuals, well, they don't have to. If you deal with people as individuals and there's voluntary choice, then people will freely associate or choose to freely associate. And think about it, you would have a community, community, locality, province, state. Ultimately, if everyone has the ability to freely associate, that's one area where you can create the most potential for peace. Whereas this forced association, what I've seen, whether you call it a democracy, right, or any kind of collective endeavor or ideology, that is where I've seen is the precipice where these conflicts actually arise.
Okay, here, I wrote down a list: religion,
yep,
love/family, government, and ideology.
Okay.
They are all things that get ruined by emotionalism. Right? That when we succumb to our lizard brains, when we get angry, when we allow people to manipulate our emotional state, we aren't thinking. And if we aren't thinking, we aren't thinking for our best interests, and we aren't thinking for anyone else's best interests either. Now, imagine combining an ability to manipulate any one of those emotional areas with a completely amoral character who's willing to lie and say anything to convince anybody that being manipulated is in their own best interest. And what have you got? You've got modern Canada. You might even have modern Ukraine, and you might even have modern Russia. We're never going to get to that point where we can think as abstractly about divorces that happen. And, some people have made this parallel that Quebec versus Canada is not dissimilar from Russia versus Ukraine. So if we're getting in the middle of it and coming on one side or the other, that we are making things worse, and I don't see how we can then make them better. I'm not saying we shouldn't arm the Ukrainians, which is going to sound contradictory here, but this is because if we truly believe in the right of the individual to defend themselves, not arming them would be as morally wrong as arming them. But the people that are making these decisions have not firmly and clearly laid out citizens of Canada. There is a desperate need for arms. The Ukrainians have asked for help. We know this might bring about World War III. We know that under Article 5, we cannot attack until we are attacked. If we do attack, we basically ruin the whole Article 5 justification. But we are making a moral decision on behalf of other human beings that need help to send them weapons. Let's have a debate in the Commons. Let's at least get a vote on it and have people agree. We are willing to cover. See, politicians, they like to get you all sexed up about the steak, but all they show you is the sizzle.
Yeah.
And they don't go, okay, well, have we bought radiation pills for if we get nuked? Did we buy a bunch of body bags for all the people that are going to die from a Russian bombing run on Calgary? I'm not saying these things as they're going to happen, but if they aren't thinking about these consequences that go along with giving weapons to the Ukrainians, what the hell are they thinking about?
It's funny. It's funny you brought up about the pill for the nuclear thing, because when I was living in Ajax, Ontario, me and the wife there a few years ago, because we're so close to that nuclear power plant in Pickering.
Yeah,
we actually did. We got them in the mail. There's these pills. I think they're, what are they, iodine or something like that?
Yeah, iodine.
Yeah, we got these stupid. It's like, oh, okay, that's what that's for, in case there was ever a radiation leak or something.
Yeah,
it's like, well, that's good to know. I was wondering why there was fish with 3 eyes there, but oh.
Yeah, exactly. So, Russia is a nuclear power, and so let's put our hat on.
Yeah, Russia, but I do just gotta quickly, in terms of the because I would be not doing I would be doing a disservice to my fellow libertarians if I didn't push back. So when you say about sending weapons to Ukraine, here's the problem once again with that forced association is, and that's the problem where it creates so much conflict, is what about for the portion of the Canadians who don't want to, right? Then that's the problem with the state, is then they can force people, like, let's say I don't want to send any weapons to anybody. Well, they can by sheer fact that I'm part of the tax chattel in this country, they can basically economically enslave me for a portion, or if not me, my kids or grandkids or something, at some point in time, to pay for these weapons that are going to, like I say, whether it's for a good cause or a bad cause. And I'm not going to be the one to make that moral distinction because I'm not on the ground there. So I can't say for if it's going to be used for good or bad or just defensive purposes or offensive, or, bad people will end up in the wrong hands kind of deal. But what I can say is this is where this conflict, this is why like people like you and I, now we can work through them because we're the kind of guys that will do, but think about how much conflict that creates in a country with just even our own place, 38 million people that have different ideas and concepts of what we should do, if we should do anything at all.
Well, by my thinking, I would also be willing to send some to the other side as well.
Well, now you're starting to sound like the military, or no, who is it? Oh, isn't
I'm
it?
not a
No,
neocon. I'm actually
what is it? The banksters, right? The banksters, I guess. Remember, the whole thing where it's the banker. All wars are banker wars, right? Because they fund
right.
both sides, kind of deal. Are you a secret banker, Dave? No, I'm just kidding.
But this is the thing that people that are being irrational don't stop and think through. Whenever you go in these scenarios, you should always take the reductio ad absurdum, like reduce it to the extreme example, just to make sure you have a sanity check on what it is you understand and what you're agreeing to. If you agree that individuals have the right to arm themselves, and I believe that you should be able to own a light anti-armor weapon. I believe you should be able to own a 50 caliber sniper rifle. It's none of my business if you're going to use it to shoot game or shoot a hole in a propane tank half a kilometer away. That's, as the state, me licensing your right to own something of technology that's on the market is nonsensical. To be the state that on one hand says you cannot own a law, and on the other hand, the same state is saying we're going to give these laws to another country. That is when you get a hypocritical, nonsensical state, and what you get is people who completely tune out and are demoralized from feeling that they are part of society. They are now being insulted as well as abused because you have not given them the same freedom you're giving to some unknown person halfway across the world that has nothing to do with your state. And there's no justification for that mentality. Yeah. So if you want freedom, you have to have people that are willing to give out freedom in ways that are completely contrary to the way people understand freedom. Because if you don't, you've done your libertarian cause in this case a disservice, because if you don't allow them to see the absurd side cases that are part of the boundary, they don't understand fully what you mean by free. Free, you mean as in it's in your interest, or free as in it's in your interest and my interest? So I don't know. Coming down these comments here, the Balkans. Yeah.
I was reading this one earlier. I just wanted to actually read it out loud there because I agree with Dave there. The only solution to the state is to properly educate following generations that it is immoral and incorrect. It won't change quick, just like we did not get here quick. And that, to me, at the end of the day, that's that sober second thought I think we as libertarians got to take into account is there's no magic power. There's no magic wand that you can wave and you're just going to create a society of all these people that are thinking with. It is a long-term process, and it literally will take generations, just like, kids that come from abusive families, and some of them may very well continue to be abusers themselves, right? At some point in time, though, you can, through dialogue, through helping them with the learning, go through their trauma. There are ways that you can get to people to think better and to fix some of these broken people, but it is a long-term process, whether you're talking about an individual in one lifespan or societies over multiple generations. It is, and that's, I think, one of the things the founding fathers recognized and realized, and they pointed out even back in the day, is like it's a republic, man. As long as you can keep it, is without the people within your society constantly being diligent and making it a point to write, not just to be educated in terms of academics, math, sciences, but have some underlying basis to create cohesion in terms of morality and ethics and principles. Without that as the basis or the foundation to build your society upon, well, we're always and forever going to be stuck in this tribalism, these warring factions where people are constantly, looking to other people. And look at it now. Like, it's the West. Some people in Ukraine, they look towards the West and they see the capitalism and what that has brought in terms of physical prosperity, right? And they want to gravitate to that way. And unfortunately, they are prevented, the ones that want to do, vote for some that want to maintain some kind of conservative aspect of what their culture prior to moving towards the West. So maybe more Russian or communist oriented, or maybe this third way kind of mix that even countries such as China is finding. This is the problem. But once again, it comes down to this collective mentality that eliminates the individual. So it forces everyone once again into aligning with the pretense of force as their means to an end, whether they're saying it's for benevolent reasons or not. At the end of the day, if you're using force as your means to an end, and once again, as a libertarian, and I've tried to stress this many times, is I don't believe in using preemptive force, but I'm also not shy of using force. This is the thing that I worry about with some libertarians, is they think the libertarian is supposed to be this passive person that if someone starts, physically abusing you or something, that you're supposed to just take it, right, and turn the other cheek. And no, actually, no, because that's actually, like I say, my motto is to walk softly and carry a big stick, is by the sheer fact is, yes, I want to be just like Jordan Peterson has even recognized and acknowledges, you got to be dangerous. Matter of fact, a person a man that's not dangerous at all is actually probably the most dangerous person on the planet, or that lacks any ability to come off as being dangerous, kind of thing, right? Is because if you feel yourself, or you are genuinely weak, well, that causes you to be fearful of everything around you and can cause you to overreact to a lot of situations. Whereas if you're confident and you like you say, you can walk softly, carry a big stick, there isn't that pretense that you have to go out and force people onto your side of position. You know you can defend yourself. Whereas, like I say, this force association, no matter how you look at it, is what's created the most conflict, or not just but the West, but all of the societies of the world. If we can get more towards respecting each other's sovereignty as an individual rather than at the state level, I think freedom has a chance.
Can I just interject and go back to a comment by Easy There? Sorry, Easy There. I saw you earlier. We got off on another track, and then I didn't bring the train. Easy There. It's from 1245. Yeah. Why didn't Russia encircle and siege the cities? Okay. Well, and in fact, attacking power 3-1 is really just for if you're attacking somebody in the open, in rolling hills. If you go into a mountain, if you go into the urban canyon, you genuinely need 10-1, because you want that one to be wiped out, and you don't want to lose 6 of your 10. So you have to massively overpower who it is you're trying to attack. So why didn't the Russians encircle the cities? Well, they tried a lightning war. They were given extremely ambitious targets. And they did actually try and insert forces in, but those forces, because the resistance was stiff, they were wiped out very quickly. We don't know, senior military leaders are like politicians, right? They just wear green suits. We don't know what the Russian command staff was doing. We do know that one of them was fired, maybe. We don't know. Of course, we're in propaganda time. But here's the problem: is we don't know what the initial rules of engagement they were given. And remember that we talked earlier about hearts and minds. I said that one of his biggest mistakes was actually sieging, moving towards to encircle Kyiv, because it is such a focal point. I think the military mentality that they had was Kyiv is the Schwerpunkt, the center of gravity of Ukraine. If we crush Kyiv, we get rid of Zelensky, we do that sort of stuff, but we also we win the war quickly. Well, the lightning strike didn't work, and I think it was probably undermanned, and it was a failure. And so you're 100% right. They didn't bypass cities and or siege them, right? So what you do in the military is you proceed along, you proceed along axes in parallel, moving, defending left and right, and so on and so forth. You come to, roads come together in cities, right? So they all become pumping points. They all become bottlenecks. So if you have defenders that can't defend well in the open, they suck back into a city and start defending from there. And like I said, it's a lot harder to get rid of people that are inside a city. So if you want to go quickly towards an objective, you bypass pockets of resistance. You don't sit there and fight with them. You go around them and keep going. So when I argued my plan, it was you attack through Belarusia, you avoid Kyiv altogether, and go down the Dnieper River waterway system, using the water as your right flank defense. So it may have been that the original orders given to soldiers in the Russian army was to bypass civilians, don't damage anything, just go for your objectives. And like I said last time, and this is why you have to have grown-ups in the room in a war zone, as another Clausewitz concept was escalation. Clausewitz, I keep using the term Clausewitzian escalation. Russia attacked and they weren't successful. And the Ukrainians counterattack, or the Ukrainians kill a bunch of Russian people. Now the Russians bring forward rocket launchers and artillery. Now they start shelling for 20 minutes instead of 5. Now they start bringing tanks en masse and shooting every building. And this is over time, the escalation goes up and up and up, and it just gets more savage, with every passing blow that doesn't knock the other guy out. So they may have either not been told to attack cities and they tried to go around them and they got hit. And because they got hit, they were forced to sit and defend themselves or encircle or whatever. Or they just ran into such stiff refusal to quit opposition that were quite happy to lay their lives down to defend their country. And, that's what's probably held up most of the Russian offensive. And that's probably what's caused a lot of the, the slow pace. But there is another possibility. And it may be that Russia's slow advance on Kyiv, and I don't want to get into the timelines here because you'd have to sort of remember, Putin is getting reports back from generals. People are coming and saying, okay, we're here, we're doing this, we're going, this is the next day's op. This is what we're doing. And you have, he's mentally updating in his head what he's going to do next. But at the same time, Putin is also at the bargaining table. So he's on the one hand, he's got the military pushing away. And the other hand, he's got his negotiations. Remember, as Clausewitz said, this guy's a goof. Oh, thank you. So he's trying to achieve foreign action through military aims because he couldn't get something at the negotiating table. So he knows that this is going to end in a negotiation. He knows there's going to be a peace. There's going to be a soldiers' exchange. There's going to be a demarcation, a DMZ somewhere. He may have held off on his attack on Kyiv to allow Zelensky the time to climb down and come to a peace deal. And if the peace deal wasn't close by, Putin maybe said, okay, well, we're just going to go ahead with a full plan and keep attacking. That may be the reason. But the fact there are large urban areas along all those routes in and out of the major cities in Kyiv is basically why everything gets stopped at a town. So if you can bypass one, you can achieve a greater objective. This goes to sort of a comment I was making earlier about these generals embarrassing themselves, saying that the Russians are annihilating the Ukrainians. No, Guderian would cut through an army line, come around the back, and capture an entire army group and force them to surrender because they had no more gas, they had no more bullets, they were cut off from the rest. Okay, so where are we going with that? There was a comment here. Dave's example with the weapons is called moral relativism. At its most basic level, things cannot be wrong in one place and right in another. That is a big causal factor. Yes, it is. People assume that their ideology I'm going to speak about a generalization about ideologies. People believe that the anchor underneath their ideology is the absolute best. And when you come along in life and when you've lived as many years as we have, you realize every ideology has bullshit in the corners if you look hard enough. Go ahead.
Well, you know what? Actually, what I've come to learn after all these years of dealing with, and I mean, I've interviewed and discussed things with people, like hundreds of them over the years, and from all different areas and backgrounds. And the one thing that I can say for certainty, it's really hard to know the inner workings of every person's mind, because they're only going to reveal to you what they want you to see or hear, right? But one thing that I can say, and I even like to say, for a Nazi, for a commie, for a white supremacist, my gauge, my measure in the person is who, like I said, I'd be willing myself to accept, who I think that at least can be somewhat trustworthy, or at least less apprehensive. Is, like I say, lots of people, well, all of us can be good and bad at any time. The day just depends on your mood, what has happened to you. But to me, is if you're willing to engage in dialogue, even if we fundamentally disagree on a tremendous amount of things, at the very least, what that tells me about the person, that individual, is they're at least willing to, give the opportunity to have two perspectives banter back and forth, because there must be something internally in their own mind saying, you know what, I'm not 100% trusting in my own thought process, so maybe I need someone else to give me something so I can better think about this. And to me, that's the big key factor here. So whether you're on Twitter, and Dave, I know you go through it just as much as I do, is one thing, like I say, I'd even be willing to, as much as I'm not a fan of Nazis, right? I loathe Nazis as much as the next one, but rather than punch a Nazi, I think the best thing you could do is find yourself someone that's a Nazi that's willing to engage in actual dialogue and see what you can do or get from interacting with these people. And I'll tell you where this mindset's coming from. As I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast they had Bill Ottman. He's the CEO of Minds. By the way, folks, if you haven't followed me on Minds, check it out over there. It's a great platform, and you actually, you can earn cryptocurrencies because it's built on the blockchain. Like, you can earn up your Ethereum. You can convert your tokens to Ethereum on chain or off chain. Like I say, Bill's a great guy. And they had on this guy, what was his name? Dave Davis, or having a hard time thinking about this. Anyways, this other Davis guy, he was a black gentleman, heavier set guy. And he has literally converted hundreds of white supremacists by doing nothing more than being willing to sit and listen. He said, now it's really difficult, but he said, here's the thing. If you're going to go into any of these situations, you have to be willing to give that person, lend your ear. And of course he said, you think it's great to listen to someone say, oh, because you're black, you're stupider than I am, right?
Inferior.
Or inferior, or because you're black, your chances of being violent or being a criminal is like, so what this guy was saying, I had to sit and listen to all of that. But then, because I gave my time and patience to sit and listen to this person even though it was ridiculous, but I was willing to listen to their grievances and give them the time to air it. And then they gave me, their apprehension was lowered to the point because they seen that I was willing to listen to that stuff, even knowing that it's very not sounding good for me, right? But he said by doing that, it gave me the opportunity, and they lent their ear to what he had to say, and he actually talked them not down just from their white supremacist mentality. And actually, he said it wasn't even that he talked them down; it was he just more or less in the Socratic method. So he allows them to get to that determination in their own minds by themselves, right? Rather than hearing someone else finger wag at them. And he said that has helped tremendously in entire communities and areas and jurisdictions in the United States where, like, there was a small, tiny, not a large group, but a bunch of these white supremacists, but the leaders, or if you can get the ones and get them thinking properly, then a lot of that stuff will just fade away. You just got to get people to think. And like I say, in being willing to engage in dialogue, even with your enemies or opponents, like I say, whether you're talking on the grand scale today of Russia, Zelensky, or those of us, whether you're libertarian, conservative, liberal, like I say, at least if you're willing, and Dave has shown this, and you people in the chat have shown this, at least, like I say, we might disagree. And I've seen a couple guys on there even call you a name, Dave. I don't agree with that. But, if we can keep the insults out of it, but we can disagree with stuff, that's fine. At the very least, we're willing to engage in dialogue. And that's what's going to keep our sense of cohesion and unity intact is at least being willing to sit down and talk to each other, because that's what's got to take place.
Let me make this as the most important point in our society today.
I believe
Our
it is.
job as members of our society
Yeah.
is to win the ideas war. In other words, ideas are like viruses.
Mhm.
They infect people, as it were. You cannot kill an idea.
That's right.
And Nazi supremacy. Now let's take this to a political arc, and let's take it back to an understanding of the causes of Germany's rise after World War II to become Nazi Germany, which people say is right wing, which is false. They were left wing. They were socialists that believe in the concentration of the power in the government. You are all just cogs in the machine for us. And this is important because we started by talking about here we've come out of 2 years of economic lockdown, and suddenly we're all being distracted with the keys jiggling of the war in Ukraine. The basis upon which Adolf Hitler used Mein Kampf, my struggle, about we are not going to take the humiliation of the West, these unjust terms of the Treaty of Versailles, all of the humiliation and that was unjustly put upon us, the fundamental scientific problems theory that rests underneath all of Hitler's justification was eugenics. Eugenics was a rising field where professors and scientists in the West were being funded by people like Dale Carnegie, to research eugenics, the superiority of a bloodline, which of course is absurd because it's absurd. You have DNA in various lengths of strands in different species. We get them from our grandparents, their alleles. We come out and we operate inside the natural world the way we are designed, the way we're programmed, the way we learn. Some of us will do better, some of us will do worse. Some will die out for some reason, maybe a disease. Others will get lucky, but they have all the bad DNA, and a couple of generations later, the sad truth comes out. But here's the problem, and this is why we have to win the ideas war. We have to point to the fact that eugenics was exploited by politicians in Germany to say, you are the superior race. Your problems are the fault of the other, the Untermenschen, those dirty Jews, those bankers, those losers, the other. They are the reason why you are poor. They are the reason why your uncle died in the Great War. They are sent here to sap and destroy your culture and what makes you German and what makes you proud. And give me the power. Give me the ability to rise up the German people, and we will unite together in a mighty struggle, and we will show the world how superior we are.
Yeah.
So
it sounds an awful lot like victim culture. That's why when people say that Nazis were right wing, I don't know where you get that from. First of all, they were socialists, right? And if you think about the kind of rhetoric, like you say, and the struggle, it sounds very much akin to, because think about it, what are conservatives considered by, or what are they labeled as, right? All these cablas, and they just don't care about the working class, right? That's basically what the talking point to the left is, and they're all about the struggle and their difficult times, right? So to me, it's the same kind of rhetoric, like you're saying. And look, the truckers are the new Jews. Come on, look at those terrible truckers. It's the truck drivers that are your enemy. No, it's not the people that are destroying your freedom for the last year. Oh no, it's these truck drivers, right? And basically the othering, and not just truck drivers, but these unvaccinated. Ooh, these dirty, scourgy, right? Not very clean.
You know, they're misogynists, they're rapists,
Yeah,
they hate their moms, they kick your dog on the street. Clearly, I can tell you all that because they decided not to take an experimental vaccine against a virus with a 99% recovery rate.
Yeah, it's just, that's what I mean. This is why, and I found it was actually one of the things that I learned early on, because being an inquisitive kind of guy, actually the first one was the Mussolini. Before even Hitler was the whole Mussolini thing, and then I started reading up on his history. Actually, the first thing I did, which I mean on the surface is not the most perfected source, but the first thing I did was Wiki. So, but at least with Wikipedia, there's all kinds of different links, and then you can go down all these other different rabbit holes. But if you actually go and spend any amount of time, not just learning about Mussolini, but his father and the kind of mindset this guy had, this guy was a full-on socialist. The only thing that separated him from his typical socialist counterparts was he was a little bit more gung-ho on the war side of it, right? That's it. That was pretty much it. He just, so that's the thing with socialists and with this identity politics and this intersectionalism is, he had to go out and start his own collective thing, because it's the problem with collectivism is eventually you're going to find a disagreement somewhere with somebody, right? And so I guess with someone like Mussolini or Hitler, knowing that their whole pretense is under the collective ideology, the only thing that they had at their disposal to unify the people, because collectivism doesn't do anything to actually do that. But what it can do is, if you use the state, right? The pretense of we're all just a family, right? We're all just one big happily family, because that resonates with people, because it's part of our psychology. It's part of our history. It's part of our, our evolution. So that is the biggest thing to me, which is why I reject all forms of collectivism, because once again, not only does it seek to sacrifice the individual for the collective, but it's the one thing that will get people to unify, but under some really, really nasty stuff. And I don't want to unify under the use of force. That's the problem with the state, because the state is a representation of force. The minute you're creating an era or an atmosphere where you're trying to unify under that, well, that means everyone is looking to use force. And of course, that force is going to be preemptively used or targeted towards who you are deeming as or determined as like the other, Dave, right? So today, back in the day, it was in Germany, yes, it was the communists, it was the Jews, it was the capitalists. Whereas in Canada, yes, the truck drivers, it's conservatives, right? It's anyone that doesn't want kids in grade 3 to be taught about gender, all the different genders that they can have, right? It's anyone that doesn't align with their orthodoxy. And to me, it's same shit, different pile, right?
Ideology and orthodoxy are very dangerous, taken to extremes, including libertarian ideology.
Well, I don't know, but that's the thing, though. How can you? I've thought about that too, because in some way now, it doesn't. There's not much there in terms of positive of thing. Everything in libertarianism is negative. So like self-ownership, party rights, not positive rights. Well, but actually, I would like you to explain that to me, Dave, because I've tried running this stuff in my mind. What would libertarianism to the extreme look like for you? Actually, that's a great thing to actually.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. What would libertarianism?
Yeah, so like you said, even like libertarianism taken to the extreme can be. So actually, I'm curious. I'm not trying to trick you or anything, but I'm curious to like. Can you paint me a scenario where that could happen? Like what?
Reductio ad absurdum. No, going to the point about everyone should have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, but that's the thing. If everyone had a nuclear weapon, that wouldn't necessarily mean that there's any genuine increase in the potential for conflict. Because to me, it's
yes and no. But here's the thing: weapons have two functions, as far as I understand them. One is the projection of force, right. Like I have the force to do something, and the other one is actual force, where it forces you, right? So, in a world where we had people that were capable of having nuclear weapons, and people that were not capable of having nuclear weapons, which is at the state level what we have right now, then you have a huge disparity in power. Now, are you 100% confident that everyone that claims that they are a well-meaning, freedom-loving libertarian would be trustworthy with one nuclear weapon each?
Don't have to. But let me see, because that's the thing. When you're doing on the 7 or 8 billion people, let me paint this picture, because it's the exact same scenario, but just do it in a smaller, because it's easier for our minds to grasp these concepts. So, like I say, rather than 8 million people or 8 billion people having their own nuclear weapons, imagine a room with 100 people and everyone has a 50 cal handgun and know how to use it. I would suggest, to be honest with you, that either no people in that room having guns, 0 or 100% of them having guns, is actually the most potential for peace. Because any other area outside of that, 99 people or one person, then it just means the 99 people can fuck with the one person, or the one person can fuck with the 99, right? So
so remember, tribalism started with a couple of guys with spears.
Yeah.
Right? So you get a group of 20 or 30 who then kowtow another 30 or 40 and point out the 20 in the corner that nobody likes. And now you have bloodshed, which like you said, is kind of like what's going on in Ukraine. By the way, I don't talk down to anyone, Joe Creep. I treat everyone with respect, and I assume people understand things the way I do. Sometimes people don't necessarily understand things the way I do, and they feel internally like somebody is mocking them. But all that emotion didn't start from me and move outward, because I just assume everyone knows as much about things as I do. I am a fairly learned person. It's okay. Yeah. I'm a fairly learned person, and generally you'll find I won't open my mouth and say something unless I'm fairly confident of it. I am a grandson of a World War II war hero who was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross from the last King of England, King George VI. I remember my grandfather telling me many stories about the times of World War II, and how grateful we were that he survived 3 operational tours over Europe, which means every night going up in his plane, flying somewhere over Europe, surviving the Axe, surviving the Messerschmitt fighters, coming back, doing a briefing, figuring out who died, who bought it that night, going back to the barracks to sleep for a few hours, and then going to a briefing to get back in and go back over Europe. So when it comes to these things about me talking about military and Nazis and all this sort of stuff, I'm not talking down. I'm offering ideas from my perspective based on what I know. You are free to use, abuse, or ignore whatever you like. Now, interesting thing, Christine Carr says the SS were saved and brought back. I don't know if anyone knows, or I'm sure a lot of people do know, the Operation Paperclip. Has anyone heard of that? So Operation Paperclip, these people were known as being in Operation Paperclip because the paperclip was removed from their papers. And German scientists who had to be Nazis in order to get their jobs in research of rocketry and missiles, including Werner von Braun, who was a Nazi, were picked up from Germany at the end of World War II and translated to Huntsville, Alabama, where they set up the rocket and missile program that's today your NASA and your nuclear ballistic missiles. So yes, and Russia was busy extracting scientists from Eastern Germany and taking them back to Russia too.
Yeah, actually, Christine, I just wanted to actually mention to Christine that sorry, I set it up on Rumble, but something happened. Now I believe after the live stream is over, and unfortunately that's my fault. I messed up on setting up the live stream. I think it might end up getting uploaded to Rumble. If not, I'll do it myself. But yeah, I kind of messed up. So I had it originally set up for Rumble, but something happened and I went over there and all it looked like is I got about a minute of my live stream at the beginning and then it just stops abruptly. So something happened. So I apologize. I did give you the link to it, but you're probably not going to get the chance to watch it over there. But
let me respond to Joe Creep's point about, oh geez, he had like 50 of them. Now I can't see. Okay. About the family.
Family.
We saw what happened to the nuclear family.
Oh, yeah.
Give free will, LOL. Yeah, actually, that is an interesting point because if you talk about Maoism, where he attacked the culture, and they had these nasty things called struggle sessions, and you talk about Germany, and from time to time in my Twitter feed, I will bring up an old German Nazi poster done by Goebbels and the mind, the mind reapers of Nazi Germany manipulating people. Who are the dumbest adults out there? The 20-year-olds, the 18-year-olds, the 16-year-olds, right? So it is actually, we talked about statism. It is actually a manipulation of the state to go right over the heads of adults or right under the noses of mothers and talk directly to people, to young children and young adults, and fill their heads full of crazy ideas and emotionalism, to turn away from the nuclear family, to turn away from their traditions, to mock and ridicule things in their society that aren't focused on the state. Hitler made himself a demagogue and a demigod before he ever sent people into battle. He needed one to get to the other. And so, yes, I mean, when socialists try and manipulate the public discussion, the open exchange of ideas, they really are trying to find any way to get to people, to mobilize enough of them to get what they want out of society. And I think if you look at it and want to describe what the delineation is between us as libertarians and them as beholders of the state who want to concentrate power in the state because they're socialists, they believe this would be better for everyone. We are like we have like a stall in the bazaar. And we put our funny wares on the table, and you can walk up and look at what we're talking about, and you can walk past, and then we're out of your life, out of your mindset, all the way. We only offer for your consideration. We don't expect you to now follow us into battle and take over some school board so we can teach our crazy ideas to everybody. Big difference.
Well, I think I'm just wondering how Joe was going with that, because he said, what we saw what happened to the nuclear family when given free will. It's, the way I'm reading that interpreted, it's like free will was a bad thing. I don't know. I would have to disagree with you on that one there, Joe. I think free will is kind of a good thing. And actually, it's not free will that would obviously be the one that would be the detriment to the nuclear family. It would be if your nuclear family, didn't genuinely keep that cohesiveness by being principled. I can tell you, I've seen lots of family units or nuclear families break down, and typically it's because, whether it's the patriarchy or the matriarchy, maybe raise their children with inconsistent values or contradictory values, or do as I say, not as I do. That's a detriment, right? Leading by example is how you create cohesiveness. I know in my own personal situation, my own anecdotal experience, so it's not conducive for everyone else, but nuclear family in my own little setting is still very much alive, very much real, very much still traditional values are still at the forefront. Why? But that's because in my family, in my situation, is mostly people of that mindset have led by example and shown good examples of that, right? Now,
well, it's interesting, right? Because the other way to interpret that is sort of the direction I was going, which is you give a 16-year-old free will and no brains to think about his vested self-interest. He's going to smash windows on Kristallnacht and write "dirty Jew" on the businesses, right?
I don't know.
What's that?
I don't know how you get to that part, but
no, because well, I'll explain. So before he picked up the rock and smashed it through a Jew's shop window, he was told that Jews are the reason why Germans are humiliated and pariahs in Europe. He was told about Jews that took away people's homes or stole their stuff or whatever, and they never fought on the front lines against the Russians or the British. He was made angry by the fact that he can't find a job, and there was a group that Goebbels and the rest of the crew were pointing at as the scapegoats for his problems, not the fact that Germany had fought a war and lost and owed all these reparations.
yeah.
So free will without information leads to what we get in Black Lives Matter, what we get in Antifa, what we get in the SS and the SA.
Well, actually, I wouldn't even say it's the information, because that's actually one area, like I say, kids are not as stupid as some people let on. And actually, because the information growing up, I heard lots of information, but if the information came from a source, and actually, which is why earlier on, I was so turned away from religion, like the institutions of religion, not the concept of religion, but Christianity, the vessels, the churches. I was so turned away from them as a child because I would constantly hear espouse, like, you know, your parents take you to the church and it's reading from the Bible and, you know, peace, love, and all this stuff. And, you know, violence is bad. And then you do something wrong, and the first thing the parents doing, or somebody's pulling out the stick or the spoon or the strap, right? And using violence as their means to an end. So to me, it wasn't the information. I heard the rhetoric, but what gave me, where I found the people I wanted to gravitate to, or the people who I actually trusted, respected, were the people that, it wasn't the rhetoric they espoused. Rhetoric's easy. It's, did they walk the walk? Did they, you know, anyone can talk the talk, but did you actually live by the example that you're trying to set for your kid? Because if you're saying don't use violence as your mean to an end while you're beating your kid, right? That is that's where you get this problem. Like I say, not just people vacating the church, but why the family unit has broken down is because you have a lot of parents these days that are on at one side of their mouth, they're talking about benevolence and compassion and diversity and equity, but they're quick in a minute to vote for a government to force their will onto other people, to use force, to use apparatus, the full force of the state to impose their ideas on other people. So to me, is it free will, or is it the fact that you have?
So when I was an Army captain, right?
Yeah.
If I had to use my rank, I'd already failed.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Yep. If you can't convince people, boys, we're going over here and we're going to do this.
Hang on. Yep.
Then I have lost some sort of referent power or expert power, some way of convincing them that, look, we came here for a reason. We're all volunteers. Yep. We're going over there to do this because whatever. And yes, so if your ideology has to resort to violence, it's not much of a good argument, is it?
No,
right. Now, there was an interesting point here about Dan Quilty said, I've heard rabbis.
This is why I like having these conversations, though, Dave, because like you bring up points that I like to think about. I'll bring up. This is what I love about these kind of dialogues and conversation is, yes, there's a multitude of ways and perspectives to think about these things, and I think the best thing that we can do is offer each other that, right?
Right.
And you're helping me think of it from different perspective. I'm helping you think about it, and all of the people in the chat are doing the same. But go ahead.
So on that note, I would recommend people read the book by Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. So in there, he has many great quotes. So Marcus Aurelius was a philosopher by education, who then became the emperor, the Caesar of Rome. Right. And one of his thoughts is, it is the mark of an educated mind to consider an idea without accepting it.
Right.
So, I believe I'm really, really popular person now. My personal belief is Marcus Aurelius was the original Buddha. So he would have appeared like 800 years before Lord Gautama, that was his name, the Indian lord who became the Buddha. He had the same kind of mindset, but ironically, he had the job where he had to set torch to a whole village and kill everyone as a message to people that you are still within the Roman Empire. Right. So his day job and his night philosophy kind of had a conflict.
A little conflict there.
Yeah. And so every night he would, I'm not sure every night, I wasn't there, but he would sit down and write, he would be using his, during the day, he's making sure he's not getting stabbed by some senator. And at nighttime, he would be writing, using his brain for philosophy. And he'd be like, why am I worried about what the court is thinking? And, God, I had a horrible day, but it came out in a philosophical thought. Right. But it's really good because he, like you said, it's a free exchange of ideas. You will read some of his thoughts. Mm-hmm. And you'll go, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. Or, I get that one, but not this one. Then you'll go through life and you'll be in the situation. And in the back of your head, you go, holy shit, this is exactly what Marcus Aurelius said 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. You can't kill an idea.
No.
We can't kill Nazism. We can't kill Islamism. What we can do for the future, for our children, for our grandchildren, is to show and demonstrate and expound on the ideas that are better for the future. Yep. But I'll say this. One of the things the West has done, as well as create nuclear bombs, which I'm not sure somebody here said, well, the government, the state has nuclear bombs because of the state. Well, that's not necessarily true. Maybe some scientist somewhere could have come up with one. It might have fallen into the hands of some religious person. It might have fallen into the hands of some capitalist, some evil banker. And it would have been used for a purpose of mass destruction for somebody's benefit, whether it's a religious bonus or monetary. And it's entirely possible it would have been done another way. But back to my point about ideas and where we're at. We are using the internet, which was the ARPANET, the original US project interconnecting networking computers. Mm-hmm. And it was the DARPANET. It was for tactical computers to talk to each other on the battlefield in real time. And the US gave this to everyone as a piece of technology for humanity. And we are exploiting it to ends far beyond what the original nerds with their slide rule calculators thought about in the 60s and 70s when they were putting this together. We are able to discuss ideas that would get us kicked out of a mosque or kicked out of a church or a town hall meeting, because we are able to communicate as free people and associate any way we want. So as long as we make it clear to everyone why we need our rights, why we don't want government overreach, why we don't want overreaction to every war on the planet, or the cause du jour of Ukraine, but not all that suffering in Yemen. We are doing what we can as best we can to support the future generations with what they want. And they may come around and think, you guys are all a bunch of old cranky weirdos. I don't mind having the state look after me. Maybe he'll tell me if I've left my door open. I mean, but so be it. But as long as we have attempted to, give our knowledge as well as technology and give some of that experience and wisdom that we have painfully accrued for our own mistakes, then hopefully they will be better off no matter what silly nonsense they believe in the future.
Exactly, because that's really at the end of the day all we have to do. But what we have to offer, that kind of analysis or pretense of trying to attain something remotely close to or similar to objective truth, because we're all trying to it's that, like I say, it's if can we be fellow travelers? Can we at least be pursuing that common goal of trying to reach or attain something that's resembling an area where it's consistent enough in all of our minds that I can be free, you can be free, and we can live, on this planet. I know it sounds a little freaking hippy dippy kind of stuff, but humanity, if you think about it, it's the natural state of humanity. Once you've reached beyond, and I'm talking about now, right now in the 21st century, once you've reached beyond the point where most of your struggles are just surviving, and we're much far beyond that point now, right? And we're into this place where your necessities for survival, so food in your belly, a roof over your head, and transportation, all that stuff. Once those needs have been met, to me, it seems that there should be a really heavy focus now on the intellectual developments, although I think we're kind of in the precipice, or we're in that moment now, but because we're in the moment, it's hard to see it, right? It's like trying to recognize a galaxy, but looking at it from literally inside of it, right? Are we going through? Is this all these struggles, all this conflict, is this what would be considered? I've kind of coined a phrase where I call it the Enlightenment era 2.0, because the internet age, so I call it 2.0, right? So is that maybe that's where we are? Maybe that's the precipice where we're standing today, and it's just unfolding in real time for us. And so, what we're seeing now is the sausage being made, right? And it's ugly as shit. But who knows what's going to come out on the other side of that, right?
Well, I mean, let's be honest here. Democracy was never supposed to be pretty.
No.
Giving everyone something that they don't understand is literally like giving everyone a nuclear weapon. It isn't all going to go the right way, whatever right means.
Yeah.
So one of my proposals that I think,
actually, let me just finish your thought. I think what it is I think the geniuses at the time recognized that the natural state of human beings isn't necessarily that they're predominantly good or predominantly evil. It's that in a proper environment structured to incentivize, to bring out the good, that's the best you can hope for it. Because I think that's what it is at the end of the day. And that's what democracy, right, was. The pretenses. And of course, that time it was just the aristocrats, right? So democracy in the Greco times, right, would have been basically for the aristocrats. But the democracy that we see today, where you give everybody at least, a stake or a say, right? And I kind of understand the pretense of that. It's the same reason of owning your own property. There's more of an incentive to take care of it if you own it, right? So I get the idea, the underlying concepts and the principles of democracy is, treating that kind of inclusiveness, because I think people, even millions of them, which is really hard to try to figure out what's in the minds of millions of people. But I think the natural incentive for human beings, just like in the animal kingdom, is to survive. And to survive and to thrive means you have to reduce as much as possible conflict, right? So that, I think, is one area where humans don't even really need that much convincing, democratic or individualistic, to try to navigate through life, to reduce, to have the least potential for conflict. So I understand that probably something.
Here's another reason why we as a society are failing. That if we were succeeding at a lot of the problems that we have, like radical Islam and this sort of stuff, would go away, because we are offering a better future. We are showing our words and proving our words by giving people something that they never had in the past.
Yeah.
If you were to ask anybody on the face of the earth in any city that has a cell phone, how you compare to your ancestor 100 years ago, everyone is head and shoulders above where they were.
Yep. So
there is a natural, happier, more prosperous, more healthier society, even though we have all the stupidity with wars and all the rest. One of my platform policies on my Twitter account is I want to start for Canada a national space elevator.
Yes, I remember you telling me about that.
Yes. Okay. So if we want to give them the future, we must prepare the future for them now. Rocketry is an expensive system to launch things into space. A space elevator, you basically have a massive cable going up into the atmosphere out to geosynchronous orbit, and you have a platform at the top and a big power and motor base at the bottom. And instead of shooting rockets into space to get them out to escape velocity, to get them outside of our atmosphere, you simply rise them up on a platform. And then once they get out to space, they have their own small rocket and they can orbit. And so let me just explain it this way. When John F. Kennedy said, we will go to the moon in 1959, and they did it within a decade.
Yeah.
They were literally taking a decade out of the 22nd century, and they were putting it into the hands of people in the 1970s. And that's what we've lost. Like, if we want to show Russians that our system is better, if we want to show radical Islam that there's nothing for you in a 900-year-old book that we can't consume and subsume any way we like, let's show people that we can build things. So if the US and Europe and Japan and China can afford rocket programs, I want Canada to be the space elevator nation, where we can allow people to put cheaper payloads into orbit. So it's no longer about those with nuclear weapons. It's no longer about those that can only afford satellites. Like, why aren't we mining asteroids? Why don't we have mining crews going down and surveying the surface of Mars or Titan or whatever? It's because governments stopped giving people the things of the future by investing in them now, because we knew that they were going to be needed. And so we've lost our way. If you want people to be prosperous, here's the reality. Science means jobs. The religion industry has only so many priests and positions for rabbis. If you want your next generation to be prosperous, you want to create technology based on brand new science and put it into orbit or put it wherever. Like, we could be having a literal mining space race. We talk about rare earth metals being so rare on this planet. Why don't we go out and grab an asteroid that's full of rare earth metals and collide it into the moon, and then build a manufacturing moon colony where we can create whatever kind of spaceship we wish. One of the things I'll talk about, circle back to, as Jen Psaki likes to say, we thinking for the future. One of the arguments that poor Stephen Hawking made before he left us is, and I'm not always a big fan of Hawking, but in this one he's right on.
Yeah.
Any society, any civilization that exists on one planet in the universe is one planet away from extinction.
Yeah.
You want to talk about real problems that the world should be facing? The real priorities, not arming rebels and the Russian forces.
Yeah.
What are we doing to stop ourselves from a meteorite wiping out half the Earth?
Yeah.
I've been to Cancun, where they have all the cenotes from the asteroid blast that hit, and I've been to Winslow, Arizona, where they had this 3-story tall crater from an asteroid that entered Earth's atmosphere over Paris and landed in the desert in Arizona, and it's like 3 stories tall. It's a massive boom. So there are real things that we could be focusing on in the future. There are real things that our government should be investing in. As a libertarian, I don't necessarily agree that everything has to be done through companies. I think a lot of times what has proven successful, like NASA, started as a government project and became the system within companies flourish. So
I think
other planets.
I think Elon's out ahead of everyone right now in terms of getting to that point. I mean, he's literally not just talking about it, but putting the millions and hundreds of millions, billions of dollars ultimately into practice to build that big giant spaceship. And they're, quite early on. They haven't even really done much in terms of testing yet. But, that's what their venture is to go to Mars, right? And that's actually one thing that I have a tremendous amount of respect for people like Elon Musk for, is not just the fact that, like I say, he's creating the innovation, the ideas, and getting a lot of the younger people ambitious and goal oriented to think about these things, right? That you're talking about. But even his whole, I would suggest that Elon Musk, I don't think I've ever heard him actually identify or suggest as much, or maybe he has, maybe I just missed it. He seems like a very, very much a libertarian based on not just his tweets, but even, like I say, I have Starlink, and I was amazed when I don't know if I told you this, but the contract, once you leave Earth's orbit, When they do get to the point where you have Starlink that's actually encircling Mars and there's, regular communication back and forth, it's already set up that there is not going to be any governing structure in terms of actual formal government. It's going to be based on your contract with the company, and it's going to be based on, voluntary interactions. And there's not going to be even Elon, based on his concept or his idea of how he wants that Mars exploration and that first bunch of colonies to begin, is along the same lines of the founding father, except I guess what Elon's doing, saying founding fathers were geniuses in how they set up the state, but the only one mistake they made is they still left this thing called the state, right? So Elon is thinking, okay, we got to get to the mindset that the founding fathers were when they were going to create this new place where you're going to create genuine platform or a basis for freedom to flourish and exist without actual government. That, like I say, I don't know how that's going to play out, but because I do recognize that freedom, ultimately, most of the time when you think about it, it rests in your mind. Freedom, liberty, these are ideas, these are concepts. So if you do, and you ground, the basis of, let's say, that Mars colony and entrench it in those ideas, now who's to say that, right? Who's to say that at some point in time, some sophists or manipulators or really good guys with the gift of the gab might trick or convince that Mars colony to go from absent of state or coercion as your means to an end. Maybe they'll convince them to implement a state and we'll be back to square one. But hopefully by that time, well, they've moved on to, I don't know, Venus or I don't know, but I do like the fact, like you're saying, that there are innovative ideas, and not only the ideas, but think of all that growth, think of all that work that has to be done. That'll put people to be very productive over long periods of time, right? If you're busy being productive, chances are you're not so busy looking for conflict.
All that work is what we call prosperity.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
That we enable people to prosper in the system that we create for everyone. Right. Yeah. Interesting side note on your Mars colony. So NASA looked at this way back when. How would we go about colonizing another planet? And they had a brilliant scientist named von Neumann, I believe is how they pronounce it. But he wrote a paper and he talked about how if we truly want to colonize Mars, and I think Mars was the example he was given, we would have to create machines, basically robots, that are able to self-propagate when they get to the other side. And in the process of colonizing the planet, they make more and more of themselves. And of course, then he went all the way to reductio ad absurdum and said, well, of course, if the machines were smart enough to know how to make themselves, and they created a colony of other machines that were as smart as they were, eventually they wouldn't recognize who the hell we were. They'd break off and be their own. but nonetheless, John F. Kennedy should be memorialized as the person that actually gave us the way forward. In the Cold War, it was the Russian versus American space race as a competition. And you're right, Elon Musk taps into that need for a better future. I wish more politicians did, because let's face it, when you have no difficult environment, objective that you're aiming towards that's harder than what you're at, you have society that kind of turns in on itself. And we start cannibalizing things and we start complaining about stuff. We are fighting over the idea of expensive oil when it should be as cheap as 10 cents a liter. Because that's the reality of the availability of the product. So when you're saying about future people and work, and I'm calling it prosperity, what we're also talking about is infrastructure. So I don't know if you guys have seen this series, major engineering projects of the world. They talk about the Hoover Dam, and they talk about the interstate highway system in the States. We need the equivalent of an intergalactic highway system that allows people to drive out into the local solar system area that they are able to prosper on their own. And I'll take it one step further and go, we also have to be mindful that we don't make a space race or a colonization race. And I saw somebody say the Europeans should colonize because we know how to colonize things better than everyone else. Oh, yikes!
Yeah.
Whoa, that's some ballsy rhetoric right there.
But you know, it's funny. You were talking about with all the space and stuff, and actually, that just reminded me. I don't know if you've heard of this yet, but Yuri, what was it, Gagarin, whatever his name was?
Yeah.
They fucking canceled that guy. He's not even alive. Yeah. He has absolutely nothing to do. His memory has nothing to do with what's going on. But this is how fucking ridiculous, like these people with this cancel culture mindset, like how insane it is that they're literally, this is the guy that, I mean, could you imagine the balls, the courage? I mean, I don't care if you're American or Russian or whoever you are, but these were fucking gutsy motherfucking people that were willing to say, oh yeah, you go ahead and strap me to that big giant rocket and send me out into the vacuum of space, right? Like, thank goodness. I mean, everything that we're using right now to communicate with is because directly a consequence of those brave souls and the many others that, you know, were the test pilots, right? For all of this insanity. And now to have people just willingly to disrespect not just their memory, but all that they brought to accomplish just based on the fact that he was born in a particular piece of soil. Like, how fucking insane can you get? Right? Sorry, did you hear me at all then, Dave?
Yeah, I heard, and I totally agree that okay. You know, the problem here, I would argue, arrives solely from the political class. We as human beings are reasonable. We stand before somebody and after somebody in a line in a store, in a restaurant. We're polite and cooperative. We are not the problem. The ability of politicians to play up petty politics, virtue signaling, wokeism, as somebody just said, right? That's the level that they want to be remembered as. And quite honestly, anybody who sits there doing wokeism as their only contribution to society is going to have a very short paragraph in the history of mankind. So if we want to be better, we have to show better and we have to create better. And that's what trickles down into the economy. It's not trickle down economics. It's trickle down prosperity. Science is where we create jobs. Science creates technology. Technology creates engineering. Engineering creates the products of tomorrow. Yep. And we have to have leaders that aren't fixated on themselves, that aren't fixated on petty bickering, and go, look, I have a project for us that will take us into the next century. Because really, if you want to talk about problems of today, you have to blame the politicians of the 1980s and 90s. Mm-hmm. You know, and politicians, you know, most favored nation trading status.
Well, when you're talking about economics, I would actually go back to an actually precise year and blame the ones, well, Nixon. He takes a big part of that blame.
He did. Anyway. But most favored nation trading status was negotiated by Bill Clinton, and it was ratified by George Bush II. So Democrat and Republican are both equally culpable in why we're where we're at for that kind of stuff. Yep. But that's because we've allowed politicians to just play to the audience, play for time, you know, pick up tiny bickering.
Yeah, actually, you just made me think of something. I was listening to, it's called Unheard. Not sure if you ever watch it. His name's Chris Williamson, I believe, the guy that hosts it. It's called Unheard. He's a British guy. And he was talking to another gentleman, and man, did it ever stick out to me because it just really resonated with me so well. But he was talking about one of the major factors, and you know what? I haven't really heard many people talk about this. And there's a lot of great economists and great minds that I've listened to, not just people that are alive today, but some of the figures of the past. And like, well, of course, they wouldn't have been privy to this knowledge, the ones in the past talking about macroeconomics. But so when you think about it, today, what we have is a society that's America's still ideas based because of their culture, but in Canada, it's pretty lacking here, right? Most of our stuff is outsourced to US, right? Our talent, our ideas, all that stuff, because that's where it gets its best traction and has the chance of taking off. But the big thing that this guy was pointing out, I was like, yeah, you're right about that. So they think that it's so important to have these universities and people coming up with ideas or stuff, right? And I would suggest, it's not a bad idea to have these academic institutions, with some great minds coming up with some great ideas and concepts. I'm all game for that. But actually, what matters most in the material world, which is where we live, is that manufacturing. And on the surface, you can think of some poignant parts or aspect where that makes sense just on the trade and all that stuff. But actually, what he pointed out is, because really what you want is, especially for us to stay way out in front of China and some of these challenges, well, predominantly China, is innovation. And you know what? Innovation. See, people think, and you know what? I had to have someone point this out to me, but it was like, oh, that's so fucking perfect. Innovation doesn't happen, right? What happens in your universities, these institutions, are theories. Actual innovation, genuine innovation in the physical realm happens on the floor of the fucking factory. And that is so true, because I worked in areas and environments, and I'm sure you have it too, it's the person on the assembly line or a middle management guy or someone there that saw something that in the theoretical part of some lab or experiment in a classroom, oh, this looked like it was going to work. But once that was applied in the real world, the genuine innovation, how to truly make it more productive, more efficient, actually happens fully on the assembly line and on the factory floor. And that to me is like, if we want to bring back not just prosperity, but get these minds, like all these people that we think are so educated, you want to get them to truly use that intelligence that they've built up in their mind, is bring back sourcing of building things in our own countries. Because like you say, not only do you get the jobs, not only do you not have to rely solely, I'm not against trade, I'm all for trade, but not only you have to not rely solely on external factors or trade partners, but it also, like I say, invigorates a million other little micro areas in your society, in your culture. And that, to me, that's a great thing, right? So once again, it's not just...
Here's a perfect example. I don't know what the year was when Bernoulli created the Bernoulli effect.
Right? Not even familiar what the Bernoulli effect is.
Okay. The Bernoulli effect in real life is the Wright brothers and the first powered flight.
Okay.
The Bernoulli effect is how lift happens with the shape of the wing. Gotcha. One side of the wing is shorter than the other. That causes a vacuum, which causes the up force.
Right.
So Bernoulli had a theory about how you create lift, and it was two bicycle repairmen from Ohio, the Wright brothers, who built an airplane.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, you're 100% correct. And the people we have in charge are nowhere near as sophisticated as you need to actually understand where you put the money.
Right.
You don't negotiate with Ford to save them from saving 30,000 jobs when they're going to ship them to Mexico 5 years from now. It's lost money. You need stepping forward. And, you talk about innovation, the whole space race of NASA in the 60s, Velcro, Tang, they had to come up with all of the things that were going to be needed by people who were going to be stuck inside a capsule over the moon and land on it and come back. So
but the ideas, like even the Velcro and all those things you're saying, the ideas might have come from some institution. Even it could have even been an academic institution. But once again, the actual innovation, right? So the original concept for Velcro, let's say, might have been someone that drew up that idea, right? Of the idea in a classroom somewhere. That could have very well happened. But to make that to fruition and to actually get the manufacturing process and how that works, right? That required actual on-the-ground innovation by a whole lot of other people. And then even once you got the process set up, because that's another thing even Elon Musk has pointed out, is building one Tesla it's profoundly difficult. But if you want to know what's 10 times or 100 times more difficult than that, is creating the equipment that actually manufacture that Tesla, because they're much more, there's much more to them. They're like much more innovation has to go into them. So the tooling and all the parts that actually, or the processes that actually bring these parts to fruition are all important. And like I say, that innovation has to actually happen on the assembly line or on that factory floor, because that's when you see, so, the first Velcro, let's say, and it had 53-degree bend on the barb on the one side of the Velcro that actually grasps the other side, right? Well, maybe 53 degrees sounded good in theory, but in practice, maybe it had to be 62 degrees. So you had to restructure the whole. So somebody had to create that innovation, like I say, but they wouldn't have never known that until that idea was put to fruition in the real tangible world. And like I say, that's that spreading around of not just the knowledge of people in academia, which I'm not against people in academia or people coming up with ideas in the theoretical realm. But once again, they shouldn't be the only ones. Like, you have to leave that room and area aside for the ones that actually genuinely innovate and create in the absence of being in some institution, right? So that to me is a beautiful thing where the private sector.
Let me give you an example of that. So, they had all the university professors they could want in the original rocket program, right? Well, when they were building things, they would theorize how big a ring had to be.
Right.
They would build the cylinder with it, and they would launch it. And if it didn't work, they'd go back and so they spent an enormous amount of money to develop through failure all of the things that work. Yeah. And that's what gets lost, is the understanding that this is not cheap. So this is where politicians, they have to be willing to stick with it and stick at it. So we could go back to Ukraine. So you underfund your military for 20 years. Now you want to attack Russia? Does any of this make any sense?
Of course, Ukraine's not attacking Russia. You meant the other way around, right?
No, we would. So if we
you're painting a hypothetical, you mean?
Oh, I'm saying, yeah. Imagine you're a Canadian politician, and you haven't said boo.
Okay.
You haven't said boo as they've underfunded less than 2% GDP.
Yeah. Okay, got what you're saying.
So this is how it would actually work. And I think we talked about this last time. I said the majority of Russians' forces are nowhere inside Ukraine, because Putin has to watch in two directions. If an attack was coming, it would come through Eastern Europe. It wouldn't come through Ukraine, because the whole point would be is you want to draw the Russians away from reinforcing themselves through Ukraine, right? We would start another front. But here's the trick. He also has to watch southward, because the CCP have also said that part of Siberia is technically Chinese territory. So we think Russia is aligned with China. Well, you're not paying attention. They actually went to war in the 70s. China invaded, and the Russians beat them off. So Putin and Xi Jinping have become allies because of American, Western-focused, Western-centric policy perpetrated by guys like Obama, who promised Ukraine some sort of NATO, savior, and this is why we're in the state we're in. So it's funny that we have to go in circles to find these things out again, when really this is the same story rhyming with itself as it's happened 50 times before.
Yeah. I just noticed, Dave, it's almost 3.5 hours, and I'm surprised there's people still going strong here. But we're on a tear. But anyways, what I'm thinking is we've kind of moved away from what our original conversation is.
Sure.
And I'm thinking if we want to have another one, maybe we could even talk about the How are you in economics? Pretty good.
I'm not great at it.
Okay.
I'm an engineer by training, so not. But I mean, it's simple math compared to that. Then again,
that's
tax
the thing.
systems.
That's the thing, though. If you got an engineering type mind, there aren't too many things that you're problem solving. That's what you're doing. So I don't think it's be something outside of your grasp, because that is an area I like to cover too. And we kind of started venturing in that now. But like I say, just for the fact that I know that people have a hard time watching these long videos, hopefully they do it in shorter chunks so they don't get so discouraged and frustrated from time to time.
Well, I hope we've been entertaining at least.
Oh no. We've definitely offered some great, but like I say, I just know that there's some people I've heard, I get a lot of feedback. There's a certain subsection that like the long form. Other ones just like it, prefer when I just do short snippets and uploads. And then other ones just like hour or less. So I'm trying, that's the thing. You can't please everyone, mind you, but I will say about long podcasts like this. The one good thing about them is you can just watch however much of it you want at a time. So, if you don't want to watch the entire 3.5 hours of it, then maybe watch the first hour and put on pause or set it aside. Or the good thing about, some of these platforms is you can actually stop it, even close it and come back, and it'll pick right up where you left it. So like I say, but I did really thoroughly enjoy this conversation. The sheer fact that 3.5 hours went by without me even really noticing that it had tells you that I was obviously very engaged in the conversation myself, and the amount of interest we had in the comments even showed that people were interested. So like I say, I really, really glad to have you on once again, Dave. And I'll definitely, like, if something else that comes up, in the not so distant future, especially as it pertains, especially with you having the engineering and the background that you do, like, I'd love to, use you to help educate people in terms of some of the aspects and the areas that you're very proficient at. So, like I say, I'll tie it up now. And for the people in the chat, I just want to mention to you guys once again, I'm interviewing. I know the guy. I've talked with them, I think, maybe a couple other times, maybe just quickly on messaging. Anyways, his name's Mark Snow. He's the leader of the Ontario Libertarian Party. And I'm going to be interviewing him next Sunday at 1 p.m. My time, so 12 p.m. Eastern. And like I say, this guy, he stepped up to become the leader of the Libertarian Party of Ontario. And I got to tell you, anyone, and Tim Moen was the leader of the federal Libertarian Party in Canada. It's a thankless and very low-paying job, I got to tell you. So, these people that are willing to put that much time and effort in, because to be the leader of a political party, you got to be willing to deal with, a lot of people are trying to, even though it's not as huge of a party, but people trying to, reach out, talk to you, hammer ideas. So these people are very patient, and I haven't had much of a conversation, but I expect you to be very knowledgeable in terms of liberty. And like I say, even though he's the leader of the Libertarian Party, which would be considered a minarchist, this is one area, like I say, where I'm going to lead by example and show that it's not about, the purism of vacating the state and alleviating our minds from that concept entirely. We're not going to that point anytime soon. But what we can do is use the power of our voice, the power of the principles, and the power of social media to interact and exchange like this and get these ideas and information out there. So today we got some perspectives from Dave and from totally different areas and subject matter than I probably will be discussing with the other gentleman on Sunday. But once again, that's the beautiful thing about these interactions is lots of ideas and information get exchanged. And at the end of the day, I think we all benefit and walk away from that exchange, just like in a market type system. Well, this is the market at work, and we're all walking away, I think, at the end of the day, thinking that we've benefited not just ourselves but each other from these interactions. And I'm hoping to keep going on these and hopefully reaching out at some point in time with even more people to get these kinds of exchange happening. I would love to have a conversation, like I say, with someone who's a supporter of fascism. I'd like to have a conversation who's a supporter of communism. I'd like to have a conversation of someone who's a supporter of socialism. But the problem is these people, I think in their minds, they recognize their ideas are not properly defendable. But in the absence of being challenged, they can convince themselves of that by surrounding themselves with other like-minded people. But what people like me and Dave have shown is we're willing to not be ideologically driven, talk and converse with anyone, because really, at the end of the day, the only thing that's helped me move beyond ideological positions where I wasn't thinking critically about it is by having someone else point that out to me. And I'm very appreciative of the people that did that for me in the past. And I'm hoping that you people are appreciative of the fact that I try to do that as well. And so does Dave. And that's what we can do going forward. And that's the best way how we lead by example and bring about that kind of society that we're all trying to strive and attain. Did you want to say anything? Sorry, Dave. Did you want to give any?
Sure. This whole conversation will demonstrate to you why Pierre Poilievre will never let me on a leadership platform in direct competition with him for leadership of the CPC. I'm doing it as a suicide bomber candidate. I have no chance of winning.
Kamikaze Dave.
Kamikaze Dave. I'm quite happy to jump into a room full of naysayers, not unlike Christopher Hitchens. I can outwit and outwhistle everybody. So I want you to understand that what Bennett does here, which is of vital importance, is he opens a platform for more than platitudes and glib sound bites. I can show you over this 3-hour talk that the things that we talked about, I had backed up with ideas and facts, and the things that Bennett brought to the table were ideas and facts as well. And we, like the bizarre shopkeepers, we put them all out in front of you. And I can assure you, if Bennett and I were in a room competing against two socialists, we know what side of the floor would be mopped up pretty damn quick. And so they are very afraid of that. So yes, if you like what I have to say, I'm Demon Dave on Twitter. I tweet all the time. I don't run from political ideologies. I meet them and run them over. I have no mercy. I conduct the Socratic method. And, if you want to know how well I'm liked, I'm blocked by Warren Kinsella.
Nice.
Because I took him to
real
task.
cred there.
I'm blocked by William Shatner because I made a Star Trek era joke of him, and his tiny little ego refused to accept that. I'm blocked by one environmental scientist I took to task, Torres Strip. I'm blocked by a bunch of environmental scientists when I basically said all their stuff was bullshit. And I gave this guy who was a PhD every opportunity to prove me wrong, and he couldn't. And then he started name calling. So anyways, you go on there. I will engage with anybody. I don't have a problem as a Buddhist. So Buddhism is my moral compass. I try and follow right speech, right thought, right effort, all of the teachings of the Noble Eightfold Path of Buddha. I'm quite happy to take insults as well as give them as well. But like Bennett, as a libertarian, I am a believer in the power, the locus of a person. And I want to win the ideas war fair and square. I don't need to cheat. I don't need to force candidates to show up with $300,000. Yes, I'm blocked by Michelle Rempel too. Yes.
Yeah. If you're blocked by Michelle, you're done.
There you
good.
Go. So all I'll say is thank you, Bennett, for having me on. I love to come back and talk to you because your format is perfect. We kind of have an idea about what we'll talk about, and then we meander and pick on facts or go somewhere abstract or whatever. Yep. I love the comment section. Please keep that stuff coming, and we will go any direction you like. Yep. By the fact that we can move and pivot in any direction along any dimension, we can demonstrate to you just how superior our ideas are. Not because we're glib with sound bites, but because we can take you through the thought process, offer up to you things that are valuable, that we find valuable, and we hope you will find valuable too. So I thank you again, Bennett.
No problem. And namaste to you, Dave. And thanks to you, all you folks that joined us again today. Really appreciate all you folks. Like I say, you are the ones that are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. And every little example that you can do to bring some of this positivity, some of these thoughts, some of these ideas to the table, like I say, will definitely pay off dividends in the long run. So thanks to everyone. Have a great weekend. This is G'day Libertarian, and I love liberty.